Driven by the manipulative words of the other woman, Lucas Vance kicked his wife out of his car. Grace stepped out into the biting, freezing storm. But just 2 hours later, when he returned, he was faced with a sight that made his heart clench. It was not just the overwhelming terror that his wife might be dead, but a blind, consuming jealousy when he discovered she had gotten into the Bentley of a strange man. A wife who had once given up her dreams for love now chose to walk away to find herself again. Their 3-year marriage ended not because of cheating, but because a man completely disregarded the aching heart of a woman. Let us follow the journey of Grace from a discarded wife to Vivian, the brilliant textile artist who brought the entire art world to its knees. The rhythmic thud of the windshield wipers on the Maserati Levante sounded futile, desperately trying to sweep away the sheet of white rain lashing against the glass. The night was as thick as ink, only occasionally torn apart by cold flashes of lightning that illuminated the slippery, desolate stretch of Interstate 95. The atmosphere inside the car was suffocatingly tense. The silence stretched so tight it threatened to snap. Grace Vance sat curled up in the passenger seat, her hands gripping the designer handbag resting on her lap. She remained silent, not because she had nothing to say, but because she knew every word she spoke right now would be meaningless. The phone resting on Lucas Vance's center console suddenly buzzed violently, shattering the deadly silence. The screen lit up with 2 words: Haley Adams. Without a hint of hesitation, Lucas pressed the answer button and put it on speaker. His usually cold voice instantly softened. "Haley, what is it?" From the other end came a soft cough and the weak, pitiful voice of the actress. "Lucas, I am so sorry to bother you at this hour. I have a terrible fever, and I do not have a single pill left in the house. I am so scared." Her voice broke, mixed with heavy panting, as if speaking a single sentence drained all her strength. Grace instinctively tightened her grip. It was this familiar routine again. Lucas frowned, his grip on the steering wheel tightening. "Stay right there. Do not go anywhere. I am coming over." "No, you do not have to," Haley quickly declined, though her tone was full of expectation. "I do not want to bother you and your wife. You two are probably together. I can just call a cab to the hospital." That sentence acted like a match thrown straight into the powder keg smoldering in Lucas's chest. He shot a glare at Grace. The gentleness in his eyes vanished instantly, replaced by cold disgust. "I said I am coming. Wait for me." With that, he hung up, not giving Haley a chance to say another word. Grace took a deep breath, trying to keep her voice as calm as possible. "Lucas, there is a massive storm outside. You saw the weather advisory. They warned people to stay off the roads. The interstate is incredibly dangerous. Is that so?" He sneered, a smile completely devoid of warmth. "To you, the fact that Haley is burning up with a fever and about to pass out is not a big deal." "I did not mean that," Grace explained wearily. She could call her assistant or an urgent care service. "You driving in this weather is playing with your own life." "Grace, when are you going to stop this petty, selfish jealousy?" Lucas growled, his voice overpowering the sound of the rain battering the glass. "Haley is all alone. She is not strong, and she does not have a network of people to rely on like you do. She needs me." Grace's heart felt as though it was being squeezed by an invisible hand. Need? In their 3 years of marriage, she had never dared to bother him with trivial matters like getting sick. Even when she was delirious with a high fever in the middle of the night, she simply took medicine and cried herself to sleep. She did it because she knew he was busy, he was tired, and she was terrified of being a burden to him. "Turn the car around," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Let us go home. Whatever the issue is, we can handle it in the morning. Go home?" Lucas laughed loudly, the sound full of contempt. "For what? To listen to your nagging? To look at your miserable face? Grace, do you have any idea how annoying you are?" The car suddenly decelerated. The screech of the brakes pierced through the rain. Lucas pulled the Maserati aggressively onto the emergency shoulder. He turned to look at her, his gaze as sharp as a knife and as cold as ice. "You want to go home, right? Fine." He reached over and pressed the unlock button. "Get out." Grace sat stunned, unable to believe her ears. "What did you just say?" "I said, get out of my car," Lucas practically roared. His patience completely vanished. "Did you not want to go home? Go home yourself. When you learn how to think and behave reasonably, then you can return to that house." Tears welled up in her eyes, but Grace swallowed them back. She looked deep into the eyes of the man who had once promised her the world, the man for whom she had given up her entire career and passion to build a family. In those eyes, She saw nothing but absolute cruelty and extreme disdain. Her heart, in that very moment, shattered into a million pieces. She did not say another word. Any attempt to hold on or explain had become utterly laughable. She slowly unbuckled her seatbelt, her freezing, trembling hands opening the car door. The cold wind carrying the biting rain whipped into the cabin. Seeing her step out, her slender frame shivering in the storm, a flash of hesitation crossed Lucas's mind, but it was quickly overshadowed by his anger. He grabbed the umbrella from the back seat and threw it out. The umbrella landed on the wet asphalt a few feet away from her, a humiliating act of charity. Do not let anyone see you looking this pathetic. It embarrasses the Vance family. After saying that, he did not spare her another glance. The car door slammed shut mercilessly. The Maserati roared to life and shot into the curtain of rain, leaving Grace completely alone on the vast interstate highway, caught between the wrath of nature and the coldness of human hearts. She stood there motionless, tears streaming down her face, mixing with the freezing rain sliding down her pale cheeks. She did not pick up the umbrella. She simply stood there, letting the storm rage around her, as if she wanted it to wash away all her stupidity and sacrifices from the past 3 years. The only thought left in her mind was absolute clarity. It is over. It is truly over. The dark blue Maserati sped through the rain, quickly leaving the small figure of Grace far behind. Lucas looked in the rearview mirror until her silhouette blurred and completely vanished into the white downpour. He gripped the steering wheel, his jaw clenched, trying to suppress a strange, rising sense of unease. Annoying, he told himself. She brought this upon herself. He convinced himself that he was doing the right thing. Grace needed a lesson. She had become too accustomed to his indulgence, turning selfish and unreasonable. A little hardship would make her realize her place. Thinking this, he pressed the gas pedal, rushing faster toward the Upper East Side luxury condo where Haley Adams lived. The moment the apartment door opened, a soft, fragile body collapsed into his arms. Haley was wearing a sheer silk nightgown, her long hair draped over her shoulders. Her face was pale, and her large, teary eyes looked incredibly pitiful. "Lucas, you finally made it. I was so scared." Lucas wrapped his arms around her, feeling her feverish body. The guilt he felt toward Grace instantly subsided, replaced by pity for the woman in his embrace. He lifted her up and set her down on the sofa. "Did you take your medicine?" he asked, his voice still carrying a bit of the harshness from his previous argument. "I managed to find a fever reducer and took 1 pill," Haley replied softly, her sparkling eyes looking at him with immense gratitude. "Thank you, Lucas. I would not know what to do without you. Your wife must be so mad at you, right? It is all my fault for bothering you 2 at a time like this." She spoke with a tone of self-blame, but every word was like pouring oil on a fire. She cleverly reminded him of Grace's annoying behavior while elevating his importance to her. Lucas did not reply. He walked silently into the kitchen and poured her a glass of warm water. "Rest. I am here now." Haley nodded obediently, resting her head on his shoulder, coughing lightly. "Are you hungry? Let me make you some soup. I am sorry my fridge is empty. I can only make something simple." "No need. You are sick." "It is okay," she smiled weakly. "Cooking for you makes me happy." Watching Haley's gentle and understanding demeanor, Lucas involuntarily compared it to Grace's stubbornness earlier. He sighed and let her walk into the kitchen. Time passed slowly. Outside, the rain showed no signs of stopping. In fact, it was pouring heavier. The rolling thunder made people anxious. Lucas sat on the sofa, staring at a dull news program on the television screen, but his mind could not focus. The image of Grace standing alone in the rain kept flashing through his head. Her dress soaked, her hair plastered to her pale face, her eyes filled with dead despair. The interstate was already empty at night, let alone during a massive storm. A semi-truck, a drunk driver, a sudden break. These terrifying thoughts suddenly struck him, making his heart clench. He shook his head violently to dispel the images. Nothing would happen. That was the emergency lane. She could call her friends or get an Uber. She was not a child. Haley brought out a hot bowl of soup, its faint aroma spreading through the room. "Lucas, have some to warm up. You were in the rain. You might catch a cold." Lucas took the spoon and tasted a bite. The soup was incredibly bland. It could not compare to the meals Grace cooked. Even a simple hangover broth made by Grace was rich and comforting. "What is wrong?" Haley asked anxiously. "Does it taste bad?" "Nothing, it is delicious," he lied, forcing down a few more bites before setting the bowl aside. "You should eat and go to bed early." He glanced at his Rolex. Almost an hour had passed since he abandoned her. The restless feeling grew larger. He picked up his phone, instinctively wanting to call her, but then put it down. A man's pride did not allow him to do so. He had kicked her out. Calling her now would be a slap to his own face. Besides, she was probably safely home by now. She was definitely angry and crying, but at least she was safe. Haley seemed to notice his distraction. She wrapped her arms around his arm, her voice pouting. "Do not worry about your wife anymore. She is strong, I am sure she is fine. She is just throwing a tantrum. Tomorrow, everything will go back to normal. Stay with me tonight, Lucas. I am scared to be alone." Haley's remark that tomorrow would go back to normal did not reassure Lucas at all. Instead, it made him deeply uncomfortable. Yes, it was always like that. They would argue, he would get angry, she would endure it in silence, and the next morning she would prepare breakfast as if nothing had happened. Her submission had become a habit, an expected reality in his eyes. But her eyes tonight did not look like they usually did. There was no hurt, no desperation to hold on. It was the stillness of dead ashes. The clock ticked another hour. 2 hours had passed. 2 hours spent in a hell of torment and anxiety. Suddenly, the news broadcast on the TV switched to an emergency bulletin due to the severe weather. Visibility is severely limited. On Interstate 95 northbound, a massive multi-vehicle collision has just occurred involving 3 semi-trucks and 2 passenger cars. Rescue operations are facing extreme difficulties. Lucas's heart felt as if it had been thrown into an icebox. The accident occurred exactly on the stretch of road he had just driven through. Unable to wait a single second longer, he shot up and grabbed his coat. "Where are you going, Lucas?" Haley panicked, grabbing his arm. "Let go." Lucas brushed her hand off, his voice cold and urgent. "I have to go back there." "No, it is too dangerous." Haley clung to him, tears welling in her eyes. "Do not go. I am scared. She is an adult. She can take care of herself. What if something happens to you?" Her selfishness in this exact moment filled Lucas with absolute disgust. He shoved her away roughly, his eyes devoid of any pity. "I will say it one more time. Let go." Realizing she could not stop him, Haley immediately changed her tactics. Okay, do not be angry. I will go with you." "I am worried about her too." Lucas had no time to argue. He dashed out the door, and Haley quickly grabbed her coat to follow him. Inside her mind, a mix of triumph and slight fear intertwined. She wanted to see Grace's pathetic state with her own eyes. The engine roared as the car turned around and plunged back into the storm. Lucas pressed the gas pedal to the floor. In his mind, there was only one prayer. "Grace, you must be okay." Lucas drove like a madman. The Maserati tore through the night, slicing through the thick curtain of rain. The wipers worked at maximum speed, but seemed incapable of keeping up with nature's fury. Inside the cabin, the atmosphere was even more terrifying than the storm outside. Haley sat in the passenger seat, gripping her seatbelt with both hands, her beautiful face pale with fear. She did not dare utter a word, only taking stealthy glances at the man beside her. Lucas's eyes were glued to the road ahead, his jaw clenched so tightly that blue veins popped on his forehead. His mind was a chaotic mess. Regret, anxiety, and an invisible dread were suffocating his heart. He constantly reassured himself that nothing had happened. Grace was just sulking. Maybe she had called a friend or flagged down a cab. But the news report of the multi-car pileup acted like a sledgehammer, repeatedly smashing into his mind, destroying all his self-deception. "Lucas, drive a little slower. It is too dangerous." Haley finally could not hold back, her voice trembling. Lucas did not answer. He did not even look at her. He floored the accelerator. He had only one thought. He had to get there immediately to confirm she was safe. Far ahead, the flashing red and blue lights of police cruisers and ambulances appeared like ghostly fireflies in the dark. As they got closer, the scene became increasingly chaotic. The police had blocked off a long section of the highway. Wrecked vehicles lay scattered, twisted beyond recognition. The blaring sirens shredded the silence of the night. Lucas's heart sank. He was forced to stop his car a distance away, stuck behind a long line of other stranded vehicles. "Stay in the car," he ordered Haley, his voice hoarse. Without a moment of hesitation, he threw the door open and sprinted outside. The rain instantly drenched him. His expensive Armani suit was ruined in seconds, but he did not care. He ran frantically toward the section of the road where he had left her. The wind howled in his ears, the rain stung his face, but nothing compared to the pain and terror clawing at his chest. Grace! Grace! He screamed in desperation, but his voice was quickly swallowed by the roaring storm. Haley had also rushed out, holding an umbrella and running after him. Lucas, wait for me. Be careful. But Lucas heard nothing. He finally reached the exact location. It was situated just before the blocked-off section. Thankfully, it had not been directly impacted by the crash. However, the sight before him sent a shock of electricity down his spine. His legs froze, turning to stone. On the wet asphalt, under the weak headlights of the car stuck behind, there was a long, black, scorched skid mark stretching for several yards. It looked like a hideous scar on the road, evidence of a horrific collision. Scattered nearby were shards of plastic and glass, resembling pieces of a broken headlight. But the thing that caused Lucas to completely collapse was a small object lying abandoned in a puddle. It was a beige stiletto heel. He recognized it. It was the shoe Grace had worn tonight, the shoe he had bought for her last year for her birthday. She loved it, always saying it was comfortable. Now, one shoe lay there, lonely, soaked, its strap broken pitifully. It acted as a silent accusation of his cruelty and of a tragic end he dared not imagine. The world around Lucas seemed to stop. The sound of rain, wind, sirens, everything vanished. In his ears, there was only a ringing and the thudding of his own heart, growing weaker as if about to stop completely. He dropped to his knees, his trembling hand reaching out to pick up the shoe. The coldness of the rainwater and mud seeped into his palm, yet he felt it burning like hot coal. "No, it is impossible," he muttered, his voice breaking. "Impossible." Haley ran up to him. Seeing the scene, she also turned pale. She covered her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. But her horror was mostly fear for herself. If Grace truly died here, right after arguing with Lucas and being kicked out of the car, then she, the person who indirectly caused this, would not escape the fallout. "Oh my God, Lucas, how did this happen?" Her voice trembled, mixed with fake sobbing. "Grace, is she?" Lucas heard none of it. He gripped the shoe tightly, his bloodshot eyes staring fixedly at the accident scene just ahead. The ambulances were still loading victims. Could it be? Could she be inside one of those vehicles? Or worse? An unprecedented wave of despair and agony crashed over him, drowning him. What had he done? With his own hands, he had pushed his loving wife to her death. Just because of his selfishness, his blind trust in another woman, he had destroyed his own happiness. His face was ashen, drained of all blood. Breathing became difficult, as if a boulder was crushing his chest. Lucas slumped down in the pouring rain, letting his tears mix with the storm water streaming down his face. For the first time in his life, the high and mighty CEO, a man who controlled the fates of thousands, felt so utterly helpless and desperate. He had lost her. The freezing rain continued to pour down, as if wanting to wash away all traces, yet it could not erase the pain carved deep into Lucas's soul. He remained kneeling there, motionless as a stone statue, his hand firmly clutching the cold stiletto. Images of Grace, her gentle smile, her warm eyes, and her dead, silent stare tonight flashed through his mind, tearing at his conscience. Haley stood beside him, the umbrella in her hand shaking violently. She wanted to step closer to comfort him, but seeing Lucas turn to stone, she did not dare. The situation had spiraled far beyond her control. She only wanted Grace out of Lucas's life, but not like this. Grace's death would become a ghost haunting his life, and it would haunt hers forever. "Lucas, let us go to the hospital and ask," she stammered, trying to offer a suggestion. Haley's words acted like a key unlocking the cage of despair holding Lucas. Yes, the hospital. Maybe she was only injured. As long as she was alive, no matter the cost, he would save her. He abruptly stood up, his bloodshot eyes flashing with a fragile ray of hope. Without a word, he sprinted straight toward the police barricade blocking the scene. "Hey buddy, you cannot go in there. It is dangerous." A young police officer immediately stopped him. "My wife! My wife!" Lucas grabbed the officer's shoulders, roaring like a wounded beast. "She was here. 2 hours ago, she was standing in this exact spot. Tell me where she is." The young officer was startled by the sudden aggression. He tried to stay calm. "Sir, this is an active accident scene. Please step back so we can work. If you are looking for a relative, file a report at the nearest precinct." "No, I am not going anywhere." Lucas lost all reason. He held up the shoe. This is her shoe. She was wearing a light blue dress, long hair, slender. Did you see her? Is she among the victims? Tell me. The sheer panic and immense agony in Lucas's voice softened the young officer slightly. He looked over at an older colleague standing nearby. The veteran officer walked over, looked Lucas up and down, then glanced toward the skid marks and debris. You said your wife was standing in this area about 2 hours ago? The older officer asked in a steady voice. Yes, exactly here. Lucas replied frantically, like a drowning man catching a life preserver. The older officer frowned, thinking for a moment before his eyes lit up. Ah, I remember now. His words hung like an executioner's blade over Lucas's head. His heart stopped, waiting for the final verdict. There was a woman like that, the officer continued. She looked miserable, completely soaked, standing alone in the rain. My partner and I were patrolling and were about to pull over to check on her, but we did not make it in time. What do you mean you did not make it in time? Lucas growled, unable to wait. The officer sighed. But she was very lucky. Right at that moment, a black Bentley pulled up. A man stepped out, handed her an umbrella, and invited her into his car. They had only been gone for a few minutes when this horrific pileup happened right behind them. A black Bentley. This information was like a massive jolt of electricity. It shattered Lucas's despair while simultaneously delivering another dizzying blow. She was safe. She was not in the accident. She was alive. An extreme sense of relief crashed down, turning his legs to jelly. He nearly collapsed again. He had to grip the guardrail to stay upright. He panted heavily, breathing in the freezing air to calm his erratic heartbeat, feeling as though he had just returned from the gates of hell. Haley, standing behind him, heard everything clearly. She also breathed a sigh of relief. Grace was not dead. That was good. Everything was still salvageable. But right after that wave of relief, a darker, uglier emotion began to rise within Lucas. A black Bentley, another man. Right after arguing with her husband, right after being abandoned on the side of the road, she immediately got into the car of another man. A man driving a Bentley. His relief for her safety was quickly replaced by a baseless, burning jealousy and rage. His ego was severely wounded. He felt betrayed. Obviously, he was the one at fault. He was the one who pushed her into that situation. But in his mind at that moment, all the blame shifted onto her. Thank you, he snapped a curt reply to the officer, then turned and walked away. His face was no longer filled with agonizing despair. Instead, it wore a terrifyingly dark, cold expression. Haley rushed after him. Lucas, Grace is okay. That is great. Let us go home. You are completely soaked. Lucas did not answer. He walked straight to the car, opened the door, and got into the driver's seat. He threw Grace's drenched shoe onto the passenger seat right where Haley had just sat. Haley looked at the shoe, then at Lucas's expression, and a bad premonition arose in her chest. Lucas's hands gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles turning white. In his head, only one question echoed, a question filled with fury and possessiveness. Well done, Grace. You dared to get into another man's car. The dense night was like a giant monster swallowing Grace's small figure. The rain continued to pour, the freezing droplets feeling like thousands of needles piercing her skin. She no longer felt the cold. Or perhaps the external chill could not compare to the ice freezing her heart. She walked aimlessly along the slippery emergency shoulder. The glaring headlights from roaring semi-trucks washed over her, blinding and cruel. Honking horns echoed, accompanied by the curses of passing drivers. In their eyes, she was probably just a lunatic, someone trying to commit suicide. Grace smiled in self-mockery. Suicide? She did not have the courage for that, but she also did not know how to keep on living. 3 years of her youth, 3 years of sacrifice, 3 years of endurance. What did she get in return? Only the words, "Get out of my car," and being mercilessly discarded in the middle of a storm. Lucas Vance. That name used to be her entire world, the religion she worshipped. She had foolishly believed that if she loved him enough, was gentle enough, and sacrificed enough, the block of ice in his heart would eventually melt. But she was wrong. Not only did the ice never melt, it froze her own heart in the process. A broken strap on her stiletto made her limp. Finally, she tripped over some debris on the road and fell flat onto the freezing asphalt. Dirty rainwater instantly soaked her dress. The rough pavement scraped her palms raw, but she did not get up. She just lay there, letting the bitter water run into her eyes and mouth. Maybe this was for the best. Let this storm wash away her stupidity. Let the cold numb her pain. Suddenly, a warm but non-blinding light hit her. A sleek black Bentley pulled up right beside her. Its engine purred quietly, completely different from the noisy trucks that had just passed. The door opened, and a tall man stepped out. He wore a perfectly tailored suit and held a large black umbrella. He walked over, the umbrella shielding her from the downpour. Grace looked up wearily. The man's face was shadowed, but his eyes were bright, deep, and tranquil like an autumn lake. Those eyes held no pity, no curiosity, only a calm demeanor and a trace of sympathy. "Are you all right?" His voice was deep and pleasant, like a warm stream flowing through her frozen soul. Grace did not answer. She just shook her head, her energy completely depleted. The man did not say anything else. He took off his suit jacket and gently draped it over her shoulders. The jacket was still warm and carried a faint, soothing scent of sandalwood. Then he bent down, sliding one arm under her knees and the other around her back, effortlessly lifting her up. Grace's body stiffened for a moment. How long had it been since someone held her like this? Lucas had carried her too, but that was in the drunken haze of their wedding night, driven by lust and possession. It was never with this level of tenderness and respect. He placed her onto the plush passenger seat of the Bentley, carefully buckling her seatbelt before walking around to the driver's side. The cabin instantly insulated them from the raging storm outside. He turned on the heater, and a wave of warmth spread through the car. "Where do you live?" "I will take you home," he asked, keeping his eyes on the road. Home. Grace laughed bitterly inside. Did she have a home? That cold, massive mansion? That was not her home. It was Lucas's house. Right now, there was probably another woman in that house. Seeing her silence, the man did not press her. He pulled a soft towel and a bottle of water from the glove compartment. "Dry off, be careful not to catch a cold." Grace accepted them mechanically. When her fingers accidentally brushed against his, she felt the warmth radiating from his palm. She lowered her head, her dripping hair soaking his expensive jacket. She wanted to say thank you, but her throat felt like it was blocked by something bitter. She could not utter a word. The car rolled quietly. The man occasionally glanced at her side profile. He narrowed his eyes slightly, seemingly trying to recognize something. He remained silent for a long time before suddenly speaking up, his voice hesitant, unsure, but laced with undeniable astonishment. "Excuse me, are you Vivian?" Grace's body jolted violently. She snapped her head up, her eyes wide as she looked at the man beside her. Vivian. It had been 3 years since anyone called her by that name. Since the day she married Lucas, that name had been buried along with her passion, her dreams, and her true self. Lucas had told her, "You are Grace Vance. You are my wife, not some nameless textile artist." Because of those words, she had given up everything. Why did this man, a complete stranger, know that name? Seeing her reaction, the man seemed to have his answer. The doubt in his eyes vanished, replaced by profound regret and genuine respect. "It really is you, the textile artist Vivian. 3 years ago, I saw your piece times Swans on the Lake Times at an art exhibition in Boston. I was incredibly impressed, but then you suddenly disappeared." The entire art world felt the loss. He spoke calmly, as if recounting an old story, but every single word acted like a hammer shattering the hardened shell Grace had built around herself. The tears she had held back all night could no longer be contained. They fell freely, hot and heavy. But these were not tears of heartbreak over being abandoned by her husband. They were tears of sorrow and regret for herself. So there was still someone who remembered who she was. So what she had once pursued was not meaningless. The man, Carter Hayes, he did not say anything else. He simply handed her a box of tissues. He did not ask why she was out here, nor did he ask about the man who abandoned her. He just gave her the quiet space to face her own emotions. This stranger's refinement and warmth only highlighted the cruelty and heartlessness of her own husband. The black Bentley glided smoothly through the brightly lit streets of New York City, leaving the storm behind. It did not head toward the noisy center of Manhattan, but turned into a quiet, historic neighborhood in Greenwich Village, where classic brownstones hid behind ivy-covered walls. Finally, the car stopped in front of a large iron gate. Above it hung a plaque that read, "The Hayes Gallery." Carter did not take her to a modern condo or a luxurious hotel, but to his own private art space, a place that combined a gallery, a library, and an artist's studio. "We are here," he said softly. "You can rest here tonight. The guest room is always kept clean." Grace had stopped crying. Her eyes were swollen, but her gaze had become strangely clear and tranquil. She nodded. neither declining nor thanking him, just quietly following him inside. The moment she stepped through the doors, a completely different world opened up before her. It was not the flashy opulence of the Vance estate, but a refined, serene elegance. There was an indoor courtyard with a stone fountain and potted oak trees. The air carried the scent of sandalwood and old books, a fragrance that brought immense peace. Carter led her to a room on the second floor. It was simply but tastefully furnished with wooden accents and large windows overlooking the back garden. He pointed to the closet. There are some new, unworn clothes in there you can use. The bathroom is right across. Please, make yourself at home. With that, he quietly left, giving her absolute privacy. Grace stood in the middle of the room, feeling the warmth and quiet of the place. Carter's thoughtful care, without needing to interrogate her, only emphasized Lucas's cold selfishness. A total stranger respected her more than her own husband, who threw her away like expired goods. How laughable. She stepped into the shower. The hot water washed over her freezing body but could not warm her dead heart. She looked at herself in the mirror, pale face, empty eyes, colorless lips. This was Grace Vance. The beautiful title was nothing but a cage that had imprisoned her for 3 years. The girl named Vivian, the girl with eyes that sparkled with passion while sitting at her embroidery frame, had died a long time ago. Changing into dry clothes, Grace did not sleep. She sat by the window, silently watching the rain ease up outside. The memories of her 3-year marriage played in her mind like a slow-motion film, vivid and agonizing. She remembered the first time she met Lucas. He was like a god walking out of a novel, arrogant, cold, but with a fatal attraction. She fell in love at first sight. To stand by his side, she relentlessly tried to learn how to cook, how to arrange flowers, how to be the perfect, flawless wife. She remembered their wedding day. He had told her, "Grace, you just need to stay home and be a good wife. I will handle everything on the outside." At the time, she naively believed it was a promise of protection. She never expected it to be a sentence that stripped away all her freedom and dreams. The day she packed away the vintage embroidery tools her mother had left her, her heart felt like it was sliced open. That was her passion, her lifeblood. But Lucas had said, "This textile stuff is just a waste of time and it doesn't make any real money. You do not need to work so hard." He did not understand. It was not a job to make money. It was her soul. She remembered the countless nights alone in that massive mansion, waiting for him to return from social events, his clothes always carrying the scent of another woman's perfume. He never explained and she never dared to ask. She lied to herself, saying he was busy, that it was just networking. She remembered Haley Adams's arrival. The woman always appeared weak and pitiful, always needing Lucas by her side. And Lucas always met her demands, completely dismissing the feelings of his lawful wife. Tonight was the final straw. He not only hurt her with his words, but committed the cruelest act. He pushed her into danger just because of a fake phone call from that woman. Carter's warmth tonight acted like a beam of light, illuminating the harsh reality she had deliberately ignored for 3 years. She was not loved. She was not respected. In Lucas's eyes, she was probably just a beautiful ornament in his mansion, an unpaid maid, a name on a marriage certificate to appease his family. Her existence was so taken for granted that he forgot she was human, that she felt pain, that she could be broken. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. It was Carter. He brought in a steaming cup of chamomile tea. "Drink a little to warm up. It will help you sleep." He set the cup on the table and turned to leave. "Mr. Hayes," Grace suddenly spoke up. Her voice was hoarse but incredibly firm. "Just call me Carter." He turned back. "Carter," she repeated. "Thank you." This was the first time she had spoken a full sentence to him. "You are welcome," he smiled faintly. His smile was warm, holding no hidden agenda. Grace took a deep breath. "Can I stay here for a few days?" I will pay the room rate in full." She did not want to return to that place, at least not right now. Carter looked deep into her eyes. He seemed to understand everything. "You can stay as long as you like. The Hayes Gallery always welcomes an artist like Vivian. This is not a hotel. There is no need to talk about money." After saying that, he quietly left, giving the silence back to her. Grace picked up the cup of tea, the heat seeping into her palms. She did not drink it. She just stared at her blurred reflection on the surface of the tea. She saw a strange woman, a woman who had lost herself for an unworthy love. No, it could not continue like this. Vivian had to come back to life. And for Vivian to live, the marriage between Grace and Lucas had to end. A clear, decisive resolution formed in her mind. No more hesitation, no more weakness. Her heart had died in the storm tonight, and from those ashes, a cold resilience was being reborn. Dawn arrived after the storm, bringing an unusually clear light. Brilliant golden rays pierced through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the mansion, shining onto the cold marble floors, but failing to dispel the suffocatingly gloomy atmosphere inside. Lucas had not slept all night. He sat on the Italian leather sofa, the ashtray beside him full. His handsome face, usually exuding confidence and arrogance, was now marked with dark streaks of exhaustion. The rage over the black Bentley still churned in his chest, mixed with a restless anxiety he could not define. The house was too quiet. There was no clattering in the kitchen preparing breakfast, no familiar scent of the oatmeal she always made for him when he stayed up late. Her absence was suddenly terrifyingly apparent, making every corner of the luxurious mansion feel empty and freezing. He had told himself she was just throwing a tantrum. Of course, she would return soon. Maybe she would cry, maybe they would argue, and then he would use his dominance to suppress her, returning everything to its normal orbit where he controlled everything. He was used to that script. Right then, the sound of a familiar but grating car engine echoed from the gates. Lucas shot up and walked swiftly to the window. The sleek black Bentley stopped at the main gate. The door opened. Carter stepped out first, elegantly opening the passenger door for Grace. She was no longer wearing the soaked dress from last night. Instead, she wore a simple but elegant white slip dress, making her slender frame look even more ethereal. Her long hair, now dried and soft, cascaded over her shoulders. The fire in Lucas's chest roared to life. That sight, in his eyes, was a blatant provocation. Not only did she get into another man's car, but she allowed him to drive her to the front door, wearing clothes provided by him. Carter did not come inside. He spoke a few words to her, his eyes gentle, then got into his car and left. Grace calmly walked into the house. The door lock clicked shut with a dry thud. She lifted her head, facing Lucas, who stood like a towering mountain in the middle of the living room, radiating a deadly aura. Her face still held a trace of last night's pallor, but her eyes were frighteningly calm. The passionate love, the hurt, and the resentment he was so used to seeing were all gone. All that remained was a freezing indifference, like an endless winter lake covered in thick ice. That calmness made Lucas uneasy. He liked seeing her cry, seeing her angry, because it proved she still cared. But this silence, it felt like a complete denial of his existence in her world. He was ready to explode. The interrogations, the insults, were ready on the tip of his tongue. So you know how to find your way home? Where were you all night? Who is that man? Do you have no shame? His voice was harsh and dry, every word slashing like a knife. But contrary to his expectations, Grace did not answer. She did not explain, did not argue, did not even spare him a second glance. She quietly walked over to the mahogany coffee table in the center of the room. She opened her handbag, took out a folded document, and gently placed it on the table. Lucas narrowed his eyes. What is that? Grace slowly unfolded the document, smoothing it out. The bold black text struck Lucas's eyes, making his brain stall for a second. Petition for divorce. At the bottom, on the signature line, the name Grace Vance was signed neatly and decisively. Her handwriting was still beautiful and soft, just like her, but now it carried a cold determination. She looked up, finally meeting his gaze. Her clear eyes did not hold a single ripple. Lucas, let us get a divorce. Her voice held absolutely zero emotion. No resentment, no sorrow, no desperation. It was not a request, nor was it a threat. It was simply a declarative statement, a notification of an established fact. Lucas's world seemed to crumble in that moment. He stood stunned. All the fury and jealousy preparing to erupt suddenly choked in his throat. He could not believe it. The woman who always obeyed, who always treated him as her entire world, the person he thought would never dare to leave him, was the one putting divorce papers in front of him. He had always thought he held all the power in this marriage, that whether they divorced or not was his decision. But today, the dynamic had completely shifted. Her ruthless calmness stripped away all his weapons. Lucas stared at her indifferent face, then down at the black and white letters on the paper. For the first time in his life, he felt panic, a profound sense of loss, an utter lack of control. The heavy silence enveloped the room. It took a long moment for him to find his voice. A dry, cynical laugh erupted from his throat. Divorce? Grace? Are you joking with me? He tried to regain his superior posture, attempting to belittle her decision with words to drag her back to her usual weak position. Just because of a little argument last night, you dare make a scene like this? Who do you think you are to say the word divorce to me? Without waiting, in a fit of uncontrollable rage, Lucas reached out and grabbed the divorce papers. Reap! He tore the paper into shreds and tossed them into the air. The white pieces fluttered down onto the marble floor like dead butterflies. I do not agree, he roared, his bloodshot eyes glaring. You are Lucas Vance's wife. You are Mrs. Vance. Do not ever think you can escape me. I do not allow it. He thought this action would scare her, make her cry and beg. But no. Grace just stood there, quietly watching the torn papers fall at her feet, her expression unchanged. She was not scared, not angry, showing zero reaction. Her calmness was the cruelest whip lashing at his wounded ego. His power and anger were completely ineffective against her. Tearing it up is useless, she said, her voice monotone. I prepared multiple copies. This one was just to inform you. I will file it directly with the court. She paused, her gaze sweeping over his face, contorted with rage. I came back today to pack my things. With that, she turned and walked toward the stairs, completely ignoring his existence. Lucas stood rooted to the floor amidst the shredded paper. For the first time, he felt absolute helplessness. Everything was slipping through his fingers, and he had no idea how to hold on. He heard her footsteps upstairs, then the sound of drawers opening, the rustling of clothes. Every sound was a needle piercing his arrogant heart. Was she really leaving? She was not joking. A moment later, Grace walked downstairs. Not heavily burdened like he imagined, she only had one single, small carry-on suitcase. Lucas instinctively glanced at her. She was still wearing the white dress from earlier. He suddenly realized she did not take a single thing he had bought for her. The designer dresses, the limited edition handbags, the expensive jewelry all left behind. The only thing she brought, aside from a few casual clothes, was a familiar vintage wooden box. Lucas's heart took a massive hit. He knew what was in that box. It was the vintage textile and embroidery kit her mother left her. It was the entire world, the soul of Vivian, the person he had forced her to bury. Her taking it was 1,000 times more painful than her leaving the designer goods. It was a concrete declaration. She was not just leaving Lucas. She was going to find herself again. She was finding the Vivian he had killed. As she reached for the front door, Lucas's phone suddenly rang. The screen flashed with Haley Adams. As a conditioned reflex, he answered. Lucas, how are you? Haley's sweet, whiny voice echoed in the silent room, sounding strangely grating. Did your wife come home yet? Is she done being mad? I was so worried about you two last night. Grace had her hand on the doorknob. Hearing that voice, her footsteps paused for a fraction of a second. That smile acted as the final blade severing the fragile thread, still connecting her to this man. She did not turn back. She opened the door, pulling her suitcase out. The brilliant morning sunlight embraced her small frame, as if welcoming a rebirth. The heavy wooden door slowly closed, emitting a sharp, clean click. The sound of an ending. Lucas stood frozen in the cold house, the shredded divorce papers at his feet, Haley's whiny voice still echoing in his ear. Hello? Lucas, are you listening to me? But he could not hear anything anymore. Inside his chest, a vast, freezing void suddenly appeared, hurting so much he could hardly breathe. He had lost something he always thought was his, something he took for granted. And now, he had no idea how to find it again. After leaving the cold mansion bearing the Vance name, Grace never looked back. She returned to the Hayes Gallery, the only place that gave her a sense of shelter during her darkest days. Carter Hayes had arranged everything perfectly. He did not ask about the result of her conversation with Lucas, nor did he dig into her past. He simply gave her absolute respect and space. The east wing of the gallery has an empty room with great lighting, he told her the next morning. I had someone clean it up. If you don't mind, please use it as your studio. Grace followed him to the room. It was separated from the main exhibition area, quiet and private. The morning sun filtered through the large windows, casting golden rays on the hardwood floor. In the center was a large oak workbench and a large easel frame. Everything was ready, as if waiting for its master to return. Grace's heart trembled. It had been 3 years since she had a space of her own like this. At the Vance estate, she had a luxurious walk-in closet and a glamorous vanity room, but never a place where she could truly be herself. Thank you, Carter. This time, her gratitude was completely sincere. Do not mention it, he smiled softly. I am just an art appreciator trying to do whatever I can so a brilliant artist does not fade away. That day, Grace opened the wooden box she brought with her. As the lid popped open, the familiar scent of wood and silk thread rushed up, making her nose sting. Inside, spools of multicolored silk were neatly arranged. The silver needles were still shiny, the circular embroidery hoops still held unfinished fabric. At the bottom were sketchbooks, their pages yellowed by time. She gently ran her fingers over the familiar tools. This was her world. This was her life. For 3 years, she had buried herself alive. Her hand stopped on a piece of pristine white silk that was halfway done. On it was an image of 2 swans on a lake, embroidered halfway. It was the piece she had planned to make for her first anniversary with Lucas. But because of his careless remark, "This takes too much time," she packed it away and never touched it again. Looking at the swans, she thought of her shattered marriage. A heartbreaking sense of irony washed over her. She decisively removed the white silk from the hoop and stuffed it deep into the bottom of the box. The past was dead. The Vivian of today would no longer create such weak, sentimental things. She took out a piece of jet black silk and stretched it over the largest frame. She did not need a sketch. The composition, the colors, every stitch and thread were already crystal clear in her mind. She was going to embroider a phoenix. Not a wedding phoenix, not a symbol of romantic love, but a phoenix bathing in fire, rising from the ashes to be reborn, more brilliant and proud than ever before. Grace sat by the window, the sunlight hitting her hair, her slender shoulders, and her delicate hands moving the needle with blinding speed. She was completely immersed in her own world. No more Lucas Vance, no more Haley Adams, no more Vance family troubles. Just her, the needle, and the black silk. The silver needle in her hand seemed to have a soul, dancing across the fabric. Golden threads slowly formed the shape of the proud beak. Blood-red threads wove the blazing plumage. Deep blue threads accented the eyes, which were both tragic and unyielding. She forgot the time, forgot to eat. With every stitch, she poured in all the suffering, resentment, and despair she had endured. But at the same time, it was resilience. A hope for a new life. This piece was not just textile art, it was her manifesto. Grace Vance was dead. Vivian had returned. Carter often stood from afar, quietly observing her. He saw her absolute focus, the burning passion in her eyes. Her demeanor now was completely different from the desperate, lost woman in the storm. The current version of her, though silent, radiated an intense vitality, a beauty of resilience that made it impossible to. After almost a week of non-stop work, the masterpiece was finally complete. On the jet black silk, a fiery phoenix spread its wings, its entire body engulfed in brilliant flames, but its eyes looked toward the light, full of life and defiance. The embroidery was so lifelike that viewers could almost feel the heat of the fire and hear the phoenix's cry echoing across the heavens. Vivian named the piece Time's Rebirth. Carter stood stunned before the piece, awe and admiration clear in his eyes. He did not use flowery words, only stating simply, "Welcome back, Vivian." He did not host a flashy premiere. He quietly had the piece framed in premium wood and hung it in the most central location of the Hayes Gallery, replacing a famous landscape painting. He left it unsigned, adding no descriptions. He believed true art would speak for itself. And he was right. A few days later, several prominent art collectors and critics regulars at the gallery noticed the new piece. Initially, it was curiosity, then shock, and finally, a sensation. My God, it has been so long since I saw double-sided silk embroidery of this caliber. Look at the aura of that phoenix, both in agony and incredibly proud. The artist who created this must have gone through an extraordinary story. This style, these strokes, it looks exactly like Vivian, the rising star who vanished 3 years ago. Could she have returned? The news spread quietly but rapidly through the New York art scene. An anonymous masterpiece named Time's Rebirth Times appearing at the Hayes Gallery stirred the calm waters. The name Vivian, which had been forgotten, was once again mentioned with curiosity and anticipation. The Vance estate had never felt so cold and empty. Lucas woke up on the sofa, his head pounding from a sleepless night fueled by liquor. The morning sun shone into the room, harsh and irritating. Out of habit, he called out hoarsely, "Grace, close the blinds." But the only response was dead silence. He frowned, taking a few seconds to process reality. She was gone. She had actually left. Lucas sat up, the empty feeling in his chest from the other night crashing back, even fiercer. He looked around the living room. Last night, after she left, he had smashed a few things in anger. Now, the shards of an antique vase still lay on the floor, uncleaned. The house, always spotless and perfectly organized under her care, was now messy and freezing. He walked into the kitchen in annoyance, intending to make a cup of coffee. But standing in front of the complex Italian espresso machine, he froze. Usually, every morning he woke up, a hot Americano was already placed on the dining table. He never had to do it himself. He fumbled around for a while before finally giving up, settling for a glass of tap water. It tasted bland and cold, exactly like his mood. Going to the walk-in closet, Lucas felt frustrated again. His dress shirts were hung neatly, but they were not perfectly ironed like always. He wanted to find his navy blue tie to match today's suit but could not find it in the jumbled mess. Usually, every night, Grace would lay out his clothes for the next day. From the suit to the shirt, tie, and cufflinks, everything was coordinated flawlessly. Her care had become like air, an obvious presence he never even registered until today, when its absence left him suffocating. Arriving at the office, Lucas carried a dark aura that made everyone keep their distance. Assistant Cole carefully placed a coffee on his desk, asking bravely, "Mr. Vance, you do not look well. Should I postpone the morning meeting?" "No need," he snapped, startling Cole, who quickly exited. During an important meeting with partners, Lucas constantly lost focus. The image of Grace dragging her suitcase away, the image of her calmly placing the divorce papers on the table, kept spinning in his head. He even misstated a few crucial figures, an amateur mistake he never made. Fortunately, his assistant managed to cover for him. At noon, Haley called, her voice still sweet and caring. "Lucas, are you free for lunch? I brought you some food. I made it myself." Lucas was annoyed and was about to decline, but then thought maybe some company would help. He agreed. Haley definitely knew how to dress. She wore an elegant business dress, light makeup, looking exactly like a devoted wife visiting her husband. But when she opened the lunchbox, Lucas couldn't help but feel disappointed. It was just some store-bought salad and a sandwich from a convenience store. Compared to the lavish, nutritious lunches Grace used to prepare and bring to him, it was worlds apart. "Try some." Haley picked up a piece of salad for him, looking expectantly. "I don't know how to cook as well as your wife, don't judge me." Lucas forced down a few bites. He suddenly realized Grace's existence had infiltrated every aspect of his life. From the big things to the smallest details, she was an invisible standard no one else could replace. That evening, Haley insisted on coming to the mansion to help him clean. As soon as she walked in and saw the mess, she feigned pity. "Oh my, without her here, the house is like this? Let me help you." She began walking around, trying to play the role of the lady of the house. She attempted to cook dinner, but the result was a chaotic kitchen and burnt food. She rearranged some decorations on the shelves but ruined their natural harmony. Every effort of hers felt clumsy and tacky, only highlighting Grace's skill and elegance. During dinner, Haley did not stop talking about her career, her new movie role, and her jealous coworkers. Lucas sat in silence, instinctively comparing it to dinners with Grace. Grace rarely spoke about herself. She mostly listened to him talk about his work, occasionally offering refined insights. Her silence was 10,000 times more comforting than this woman's noise. "Lucas." Haley leaned her head on his shoulder after dinner, pouting. "Why don't I move in with you? So I can take care of you. Seeing you alone like this breaks my heart." That sentence was the final straw. The idea of another woman sleeping in his and Grace's bed, using her things, replacing her in this house, suddenly made Lucas feel nauseous. He gently but firmly pushed her away. "No need." "Why not?" Haley looked surprised. "Aren't you two getting a divorce soon anyway?" "Let me," I said. "No need." Lucas cut her off, his voice noticeably colder. "This is my and Grace's house. Until the divorce is finalized, she is still Mrs. Vance. You should go home." This was the first time he had acted so coldly toward her. Haley sat stunned, tears filling her eyes. Are you still thinking about her? She already ran off with another man? That is my business." Lucas stood up, unwilling to speak further. "It is late. Go." Haley stomped her foot in anger and left crying. After she was gone, Lucas wandered alone through the silent house. He subconsciously walked upstairs and opened the door to their master bedroom. Everything was exactly the same, but it lacked her presence. He opened her closet. All the designer dresses, handbags, and shoes he had thrown money at were still untouched, hanging perfectly like a mockery. She did not take a single thing that belonged to him. The only thing she took was the old wooden box holding things he had deemed useless. It was only then that Lucas realized in shock. She did not leave because of money or material things. She left to find her own soul. The soul that he, with his own hands, had tried to extinguish. An unprecedented sense of loss washed over him, agonizing and crystal clear. In the days that followed, Lucas lived in a state of maddening contradiction. During the day, he buried himself in work, acting colder and more ruthless than ever, leaving the entire Vance Corporation staff living in fear. But when night fell and he returned to the empty mansion, loneliness and loss gnawed at him. The image of Grace leaving, and the silhouette of the black Bentley, played on a loop in his mind like a torture film. Jealousy slowly coiled around his arrogant heart like a venomous snake. He could not accept the fact that the wife who had always obeyed him could leave so decisively. And almost immediately, there was another man by her side. In Lucas's stubborn mind, Grace was his possession. Even if he did not need her or cherish her, no one else had the right to covet her. The urge to find out who the man was, to find out how long they had been sneaking around behind his back, became stronger than ever. He needed a reason, an excuse to justify his abandonment of her, to prove that he was not the one at fault that she had betrayed him first. In his lavish CEO office, Lucas called his trusted assistant in. "Cole, investigate something for me." His voice was ice cold. Assistant Cole immediately bowed his head. "Yes, Mr. Vance. What is it?" "Find out who owns a black Bentley." License plate XXX. Lucas recited the plate number he had managed to memorize on that stormy night. "I want to know everything about this man. His identity, his background, his social circle. And most importantly, find out who he has been associating with recently." He paused, his eyes darkening. Especially if he has been associating with Grace. Cole was slightly surprised to hear the Mrs. name, but he was smart enough not to ask questions. He simply bowed. "Yes, Mr. Vance. I will get on it immediately." With the resources and connections of the Vance Corporation, investigating someone was a breeze. In less than 2 days, a thick file was placed neatly on Lucas's desk. He opened the file. The first page contained a photo and the details of the man. Carter Hayes, 30 years old. The face in the photo was extremely handsome, but not sharp and dominant like Lucas's. Carter's looks were refined and calm. His deep eyes looked as though they held a sky full of intellect. He was a renowned artist and art collector, the owner of New York's most prestigious private art space, the Hayes Gallery. His background was also formidable. He came from an old money family with a long tradition in fine arts based in Boston. The more Lucas read, the uglier his expression became. He had originally thought the other man was just some nouveau rich, using money to seduce his naive wife. But no. Carter Hayes not only had money, he had status, he had class, and he was a truly respected figure among the elite. His rival's excellence made his jealousy and sense of failure flare up violently. He flipped to the next page, and his heart felt as though it was squeezed by an invisible hand. The report was crystal clear. According to the investigation, Mrs. Vance Grace moved into the Hayes Gallery after leaving the Vance estate and is currently residing there. Attached were several photos taken from a distance. Grace was walking in the courtyard of the Hayes Gallery. Carter stood beside her. Although there was no intimate contact, the atmosphere between them was incredibly harmonious and peaceful. In another photo, she was sitting by an embroidery frame, the sunlight illuminating her focused face, a tranquil beauty Lucas had never seen before. Smash! Lucas slammed his fist onto the desk, causing the coffee beside it to spill. All the malicious assumptions in his head seemed to be confirmed. She was living with him. She had moved in with that man. Rage and a sense of humiliation erupted, completely blinding Lucas's reason. He did not consider the fact that he was the one who kicked her out, leaving her with nowhere to go. He did not consider the possibility that their relationship was innocent. In his mind at that moment, there was only one word: betrayal. So that's it. So she already had an exit strategy. Her firm demand for a divorce was not out of hurt, but because she had found a better backer. The woman I always thought was docile in content was actually this scheming. Good. Very good. Grace. Lucas ground his teeth, his eyes flashing with red veins. He felt like an idiot being led by the nose. His anger morphed into a manic desire for possession. He had to go there. He had to catch them in the act. He had to drag that shameless woman back to show her the consequences of daring to betray Lucas Vance. He had to show this Carter Hayes that his woman was not something anyone could just touch. Without a second of hesitation, Lucas grabbed his car keys and suit jacket, striding out of the office. He radiated a cold, murderous aura, making all the employees in his path bow their heads and step aside. He was going to the Hayes Gallery to reclaim what was his. The dark blue Maserati Levante braked sharply in front of the main gates of the Hayes Gallery, making a screeching sound that shattered the serene quiet of the area. Lucas stepped out, slamming the door violently. Ignoring the startled security guard, he marched straight inside, posturing like a king patrolling his territory. The art space of the Hayes Gallery was entirely different from Lucas's world of concrete and steel. There was no flashy opulence here, only subtle refinement. The scent of sandalwood hung in the air, the sound of water trickling from a fountain, the rustle of oak leaves in the wind. All of these things were an absolute eyesore to Lucas right now. The elegance of the place seemed to mock his crude, worldly aggression. "Where is Grace?" He grabbed a passing staff member, barking a cold order. The employee, terrified by his aura, stammered, "Sir, who are you looking for?" "I am looking for my wife. Tell Grace to come out here." At that moment, a calm, steady voice echoed from behind. "Mr. Vance, what brings you to my gallery?" Lucas whipped around. Carter Hayes stood not far away. He wore casual linen clothes, his sleeves rolled up, looking utterly at ease. His calm eyes met Lucas's, showing no fear or flinching. The contrast between the two men was instantly clear. One was like a raging inferno, the other like a placid autumn lake. Seeing his rival, the fire in Lucas's chest roared even higher. He stepped forward, standing face to face with Carter, his eyes sharp as knives. "So you are Mr. Hayes. I do not care what brought me here. I just want to ask you one thing. Hiding another man's wife in this place, is that the action of a gentleman?" His words were highly provocative and insulting. Carter did not get angry. He simply curled his lip into a faint smile, one that carried immense weight. "Mr. Vance, you are looking for Grace, but here, there is only the textile artist, Vivian." This sentence, though spoken softly, was like a thunderous slap across Lucas's face. It was not just an answer, it was a denial. It denied his rights as a husband, denied the name Grace Vance that he had forced upon her. It was telling him that the woman he was looking for no longer existed. Here, there was only a new person, a person who did not belong to him. "You are lying!" Lucas roared, losing all his cool. "Where is she? You two dare sneak around behind my back. Today I am going to settle this." Just as the tension reached its peak, a clear but indifferent voice rang out from the studio area. "What is all the noise?" Both men turned around. Grace, or rather, Vivian, was standing at the door. She wore a loose white button-down shirt and gray wide-leg linen pants, an indigo apron tied around her waist. In her right hand, she still held an embroidery needle. Her long hair was tied up neatly in a bun, exposing her elegant neck and smooth forehead. The woman standing there was no longer the glamorous, haughty Mrs. Vance draped in designer dresses. She was rustic, simple, but she radiated an aura of freedom and independence he had never seen before. She looked at Lucas. Her eyes were as clear as water, but they held no surprise, no fear, no love, and no resentment. There was only a cold distance, as if looking at a stranger who had shown up uninvited. That gaze pierced straight into Lucas's heart, hurting more than any curse. "You," he stammered, all the aggressive words he had prepared, suddenly choking in his throat. "You dare look at me like that? Follow me home right now." He tried to salvage his last bit of authority. Vivian frowned slightly, as if listening to an incredibly ridiculous joke. "Mr. Vance, you are in the wrong place," she said flatly. "This is the Hayes Gallery, not your home." She paused, her gaze sweeping over his face, which was turning pale with anger, and then delivered a final, cruel sentence. "And I do not have a home to go back to with you, Mr. Vance." Those two distant words coming from her mouth were like a knife slicing through his ego. "You!" Lucas lunged forward in a frenzy, intending to grab her arm. He could not accept this reality. He had to drag her back, force her to become the obedient Grace of the past. But before his hand could touch her, a figure blocked his path. Carter stepped in front of Lucas, raising his arm to stop him. He did not use much force, but the action was resolute. "Mr. Vance, please have some self-respect." Carter's voice was still calm, but his eyes flashed with a cold warning. Blocked, Lucas looked at the man protecting her, then at her completely emotionless face. He suddenly felt ridiculous. He came here to catch them in the act, to assert his dominance, but ended up being treated like nothing more than a nuisance. He was not the husband here, not the man in power. Here, in her new world, he was just an outsider. Anger, shame, jealousy, and a vague terror of permanent loss blended together, making his chest ache. There was nothing he could do. He could not use money or power to threaten Carter Hayes. He certainly could not use emotions to chain down a woman who had gone completely cold toward him. For the first time in his life, Lucas Vance tasted total defeat. He dropped his hands, took a step back, his eyes still glued to Vivian. Finally, he did not say another word, simply turning and striding out of the gallery. His steps faltered slightly, like a wounded beast trying to hold on to its last shred of pride. The quiet returned to the Hayes Gallery, as if silently mocking the storm that had just passed through the heart of the loser. The Manhattan International Conference Center was brightly lit tonight, gathering the elite of the city. The Starlight Charity Art Auction was a prestigious annual event where rare items were exhibited, and also a place for the upper class to display their status and philanthropy. Lucas arrived late. He was not genuinely interested in art. His presence here was purely a social obligation as the head of the Vance Corporation. But as he glanced over the auction catalog, his eyes locked onto a name. Item 13. Double-sided silk embroidery rebirth. Artist. Vivian. Vivian. That name was like a sharp thorn piercing his chest. After his humiliating defeat at the Hayes Gallery, he had locked himself away in anger and frustration. He forbade himself from thinking about her. But this name provocatively dragged her back into his mind. He found a secluded spot in the corner of the ballroom, his sharp eyes scanning the crowd. And then he saw her. Lucas's heart involuntarily skipped a beat. She was not Grace, the plain wife in loungewear. She was Vivian. She wore a sleek, modern emerald green slip dress, expertly tailored to hug her soft curves. Her long hair was pinned up, revealing her pale neck and delicate pearl earrings. She wore light makeup, just a thin layer of foundation and a soft tint on her lips. Yet she radiated an ethereal, elegant beauty that drew every eye. And standing beside her was none other than Carter Hayes. He wore a sharp gray suit, looking refined and calm. The two of them stood together. There were no intimate gestures, yet they created a picture so harmonious it was blinding. He was leaning in to say something to her, and she smiled softly. That smile was not the forced, enduring smile he was used to seeing. It was a truly gentle, peaceful smile. That image acted like a torch, setting Lucas's chest ablaze. The jealousy and possessiveness he had tried to suppress roared back, fiercer than ever. That woman was his. That smile was supposed to belong to him. Just then, the auctioneer on stage projected his voice. And next, ladies and gentlemen, please admire a masterpiece of traditional fine textile art, a piece that has caused quite a stir among collectors recently. Introducing Time's Rebirth. The stage lights focused on the piece displayed prominently on the easel. The fiery phoenix seemed to awaken, breathtakingly lifelike. Under the lights, every golden and red thread appeared to be burning, radiating an intense vitality, both tragic and unyielding. The entire ballroom echoed with gasps of awe. Carter, acting as the presenter, stepped onto the stage. He did not use flowery words. He simply told the story of the nearly lost technique of double-sided silk embroidery and the passion the artist had poured into the piece. The artist behind Time's Rebirth, Vivian, is also here with us tonight, Carter said, his eyes turning gently toward her. She hopes this piece can bring a little warmth to the world. All proceeds from this auction will be donated to the Appalachian Youth Education Foundation to build boarding schools for children in the mountains. All eyes turned to Vivian. She simply nodded and smiled, without a hint of shyness or awkwardness. Lucas sat in the dark corner, his hands balled into tight fists. He looked at the artwork on stage, then at the woman shining radiantly below. Was this his wife? The woman he always assumed only knew how to cook, clean, and rely on him. How could she create a masterpiece that moved people's souls? How could she stand before so many people with such confident independence? He realized that for 3 years, he had never truly known this woman. He had only seen the Mrs. Vance shell he created for her, completely unaware of what a precious gem lay beneath it, a gem he had thrown away with his own hands. Starting bid for Times, Rebirth Times is $500,000, the auctioneer announced. The bidding began. 600,000, 800,000, 1 million. Paddles were raised continuously. Prominent collectors and art-loving executives did not want to miss out on this masterpiece. They were not just buying art. They were buying a story and a rare talent. Vivian stood calmly observing. Her eyes swept over the crowd and suddenly stopped at the dark corner where Lucas was sitting. Their eyes met across the room. In his eyes was shock, jealousy, anger, and a vague regret. In her eyes, there was only calmness, no love, no hate, indifferent, as if looking at a complete stranger. It was that very indifference that fully enraged Lucas. A manic idea flashed through his mind. He would use the method he was best at, the only method he knew, to assert his power. He was going to buy it. He was going to buy her life's work, her soul, to show her that no matter how high she flew, she would never escape his grasp. $5 million. A cold, authoritative voice suddenly echoed, overpowering all other bids. The entire ballroom instantly fell silent. All eyes turned toward the dark corner. Lucas slowly stood up, stepping out into the light. He held his bidding paddle high, his face devoid of emotion, but his eyes blazed with the fire of possession. Lucas's appearance and his insane bid cast an eerie silence over the room. Then, whispers spread like waves. That is Lucas Vance of Vance Corporation. My God, $5 million for a textile piece. Is he crazy? I have never heard of Mr. Vance taking an interest in art. This is bizarre. Rumor has it he and that artist Vivian have quite a complicated history. All the gossip reached Lucas's ears, but he did not care. His gaze was locked onto one person only. He wanted to see shock, confusion, wavering in her eyes. He wanted to see her realize that no matter how hard she tried to run, she was still under his control. On stage, Carter frowned slightly. He looked at Lucas, then at Vivian. He understood exactly what Lucas was doing. This was not an act of art appreciation. This was a provocation, a brute act of possession. He raised his paddle. $5.5 million. Lucas sneered without hesitation. $7 million. The room erupted into gasps again. This price far exceeded the true market value of a contemporary textile piece, no matter how exquisite. Everyone understood this was no longer an auction. It was a war between two men. Carter looked at Vivian. She silently shook her head at him, a very slight motion. She did not want him getting dragged into this meaningless battle because of her. Carter understood. He smiled reassuringly and slowly lowered his paddle. $10 million. Lucas shouted his final price. An astronomical figure, like a declaration of absolute victory. The auctioneer, after a moment of shock, hurriedly banged his gavel. $10 million going once, $10 million going twice, $10 million sold. Congratulations to Mr. Vance for becoming the owner of the masterpiece times rebirth. Applause rang out, though it was mostly due to shock at Lucas's reckless spending rather than genuine congratulations. He stood there amidst the curious stares, feeling a brief sense of triumph. He had won. He used his money to crush his rival and buy back what was hers. He felt he had regained a bit of control. After the auction ended, Lucas walked straight to the VIP lounge, where Vivian and Carter were speaking with a few collectors. His arrival made the atmosphere instantly awkward. The others tactfully slipped away, leaving only the three of them. Lucas stepped forward, standing right in front of Vivian. He didn't look at Carter. His eyes were only for her. He held up the auction contract, his deep voice carrying a pride he could not conceal. Well, the piece you poured your heart into, the thing you call a rebirth, did it not end up in my hands after all? He spoke like a superior bestowing a favor. Grace, you need to understand one thing. No matter who you become or how high you fly, you will never escape me. He waited. He waited for anger, for helplessness, or at least a slight tremor in her eyes. But he was disappointed once again. Vivian looked up at him, her eyes still as tranquil as a rippleless autumn lake. She showed absolutely no reaction he expected. She just smiled faintly, a distant, polite smile. Thank you, Mr. Vance, for your support. Her voice was clear and calm, as if speaking to a business partner and nothing more. The entire $10 million, per my wishes, will be transferred directly to the Appalachian Youth Education Foundation to build boarding schools for children in the mountains. You have done a very meaningful thing. She paused, her gaze sweeping over his gradually stiffening face, and then delivered her final, devastating sentence. On behalf of those children, I thank you for your generosity, Mr. Vance. Smack, Lucas's victory. His arrogance, everything shattered into pieces in that exact moment. What had she done? She had turned his aggressive act of possession into a noble act of charity. She had turned his provocation into support for her own cause. He spent $10 million not to humiliate her, not to win her back, but to become the biggest sponsor of her charitable efforts. This humiliation was 1,000 times more painful than being rejected. He used money to prove his power, while she used that exact money to elevate her own worth, reducing him to a fool mindlessly throwing cash at a good deed. The smile on his lips froze. His face went from pale to a sickly green. He stood there, contract in hand, looking like a clown on a glamorous stage. Vivian did not spare him another second. She turned to Carter and smiled. "It is getting late. Let us go home." "All right," Carter nodded. His eyes swept over Lucas, not with gloating, but with a touch of pity. The two walked away side by side, leaving Lucas standing there alone, his feet rooted to the floor. The feeling of triumph vanished, replaced only by an emptiness and a crushing, belated regret that began to gnaw at his soul. He could use money to buy her art, but he could never buy back her heart, her respect, or even her gaze. The price of regret, it turned out, was extremely high. The event at the Starlight Gala quickly became hot gossip among New York's elite. The name Vivian, along with her masterpiece Time's Rebirth, was spoken of with admiration and awe. Meanwhile, Lucas's act of throwing away $10 million was discussed with various underlying meanings. Haley Adams, naturally, was not excluded from the loop. When she read the news online, her initial reaction was pure glee. In her eyes, Lucas spending that massive amount of money was meant to humiliate Grace, to prove that no matter who she became, she was still just a plaything in his hands. This sent Haley's sense of triumph soaring. She felt her position by Lucas's side was becoming even more secure. Carrying that joyful mood, Haley personally prepared an expensive fruit basket and headed straight to the Vance Corporation headquarters. She wanted to celebrate his victory with him. "Lucas!" She walked into the CEO's office without knocking, her voice sweet and ringing. "I heard the news. You were so amazing. That $10 million definitely put Grace in her place." Her face must have looked so pale then. Lucas was sitting behind his desk, his face dark. He had just had to sign the $10 million check over to the Appalachian Youth Education Foundation under his personal name, feeling as if he had just slapped himself hard in the face. Hearing Haley's voice only multiplied his irritation. "What are you doing here?" he asked coldly. Haley paused slightly at his attitude, but quickly regained her pouty demeanor. "I came to visit you. Look, I even brought your favorite wine. Let us celebrate a little." She walked around the desk, intending to sit on his lap as usual. Lucas leaned away slightly to avoid her. "I am busy." This small rejection made the smile on Haley's lips freeze. She felt something was wrong, but she persisted. "Busy with what?" "Everything with Grace is settled now." "What is there to worry about?" She wrapped her arms around his neck from behind, her tone shifting to demanding. "Lucas, why don't we go public with our relationship?" She moved out, and everyone knows what happened at the auction. "This is the perfect time. I don't want to keep sneaking around like this." She had waited for this day for so long, the day she could rightfully stand beside Lucas Vance and become the next Mrs. Vance. But Lucas suddenly found her voice incredibly annoying. "I told you, it is not the right time." "Why not?" Haley lost her patience. "What are you waiting for? Are you planning to leave the title of Mrs. Vance empty forever? Or do you still miss your ex-wife who made a fool out of you?" That last sentence hit Lucas's sore spot. "Shut your mouth," he snapped suddenly, pushing her arms away forcefully. "Who gave you the right to talk about her like that?" Pushed away, Haley stumbled back a few steps. She could not believe it. He was defending Grace. Am I wrong? Tears welled up in her eyes. "She is living with another man. Isn't that cheating on you? You spent $10 million. Wasn't that to humiliate and warn her? Why do you have this look on your face now? What exactly are you thinking, Lucas?" "What I think is none of your business." Lucas stood up sharply. The exhaustion and anger he had suppressed for days finally exploded. He stared at Haley's crying face, a face he once thought was pitiful and innocent, but now saw as nothing but fake and annoying. Her constant demands, her noise. It was the exact opposite of Grace's quiet endurance. An involuntary comparison formed in his mind. "Haley, do you know that in the past 3 years, she never once demanded anything from me?" Lucas's voice was not loud, but it struck Haley like a hammer. "She never demanded public displays of affection. She never asked me to buy her expensive things. And she never interrogated me when I came home late." He spoke. And the more he spoke, the clearer Grace's image became in his mind. "And look at you. Look at yourself." Haley was completely stunned. He was comparing her to Grace, and she was the loser. This was the ultimate insult. What do you mean by that? Her voice trembled with anger and self-pity. Are you saying I am annoying? Did you forget? You were the one who said you hated her dead silence. Why are you now? Enough, Lucas cut her off. He felt his head throbbing as if it were about to explode. He did not want to hear another word. Go home. I want quiet. The gentle, pampering mask Lucas wore had finally been torn off, revealing his true self: cold, selfish, and impatient. This was his true nature. The nature Grace had endured for 3 years. Haley looked at the man in front of her, feeling as if she was looking at a stranger. Panic began to consume her. The perfect man she thought she had wrapped around her finger was not as easily manipulated as she thought. The first crack in their fake relationship had appeared, deep and irreparable. After the explosive argument with Haley, Lucas was in no mood to work. He left the office, but did not want to return to the empty mansion. His car drove aimlessly through the crowded streets of New York, but inside his heart there was a desolate wasteland. He felt lost and stranded, a feeling a man who always controlled everything had never experienced. Eventually, he stopped his car in front of his mansion. It was still the same extravagant and glamorous, but utterly devoid of warmth. It was frighteningly silent. He wandered through the house, from the living room to the bedroom, then down to the kitchen. Everywhere he went, images of Grace appeared. Grace reading on the sofa, Grace busy cooking in the kitchen, Grace smiling to welcome him home. Images that once made him feel normal, even bored, now became absolute luxuries he could no longer touch. His aimless steps brought him to a small room at the end of the second-floor hallway. This was a small study Grace used to manage household expenses, or sometimes find a quiet corner to read. He rarely set foot in here. The room was simply furnished. A wooden desk, a bookshelf, and a small armchair by the window. Everything was still neat and clean, but now covered in a thin layer of dust. He slumped into the armchair tiredly, looking out the window. He needed something to numb himself: a bottle of liquor, a book, anything. He absent-mindedly pulled open a drawer of the old wooden desk. Inside were not household ledgers, but an old-looking wooden box. It was not the sandalwood box she took with her. This one looked simpler, more rustic, as if it had been around for a very long time. Curious, Lucas picked it up. It wasn't locked. He gently opened the lid. The first thing that caught his eye were yellowed sketchbooks. He flipped through the pages. Inside were countless design drafts for textile art, vibrant peonies, lively carp leaping over the Dragon Gate, picturesque landscapes. The strokes were exquisite, the compositions unique, brimming with life. He even saw the initial sketch for Time's Swans on the Lake, the piece Carter had mentioned, and the early concept for Time's rebirth. He sat stunned. This was the talent he had flatly dismissed as useless and a waste of time. So, before becoming Mrs. Vance, she had been such a radiantly brilliant artist. Putting the sketchbooks aside, Lucas noticed a small notebook with a dark brown cover lying at the bottom of the box. A diary. His arrogant nature told him he should not invade her privacy. But another urge, a desperate craving to understand why everything had turned out this way, won out. He needed answers. His hands trembled as he opened the diary. Her handwriting was beautiful, graceful, and gentle. The entries were not continuous, just short thoughts recorded on special days. The first page marked their wedding day. "Today is my wedding day," Lucas said. "You just need to be Mrs. Vance. That is enough. I packed away my embroidery kit. Maybe this is the right thing to do. For him, I can give up everything." Lucas's heart gave a sharp twinge. He turned to another page, their first anniversary. "Today is our anniversary." He forgot. He went to a networking event and came home late. "It is okay. He is busy working for our family. I ate the little cake by myself. It was still very sweet." His chest began to feel tight. Another page, written a few weeks before that fateful night. "I feel him growing more distant every day. The perfume on his shirt is not just one scent anymore. My heart hurts so much, but what can I do? I cannot lose him." And then the final page. The ink still looked fresh. The date written on it struck Lucas like a bolt of lightning. "Today is our 3-year anniversary. I booked his favorite restaurant. I hope he comes home early tonight. Just one dinner is all I ask. Lucas, I love you." Their 3-year anniversary. The day he abandoned her on the interstate. The day he cruelly called her annoying. The day he rushed to the side of another woman. That day was their 3-year anniversary. The day she had carefully prepared for. The day her only small wish was to have dinner with him. Lucas's mind exploded. He suddenly remembered that night in the car, right before Haley called. She had hesitated, wanting to tell him something. "Lucas, tonight is..." But he had lost his patience and cut her off. "If you have something to say, spit it out." She had tried to remind him of their anniversary, but his coldness had blocked all the words she wanted to say. All the disconnected puzzle pieces suddenly snapped together, forming a brutal truth, exposing his entire selfishness, thoughtlessness, and cruelty. Regret was no longer a vague sense of loss. It mutated into a sharp knife, plunging straight into his heart, twisting deep, hurting so much he could not breathe. What had he done? He had trampled on her love, destroyed her trust, and shattered her heart on the very day she cherished most. Lucas buried his head in his hands, clutching the diary tightly. The broad shoulders of the man who always believed himself to be unshakable shook violently for the first time in his life. He didn't just lose her. He murdered her love with his own heartlessness. In a luxurious penthouse overlooking the East River, the shattered pieces of expensive crystal glasses littered the floor. Haley Adams panted heavily, her hair a mess, her beautiful face contorted with rage and resentment. She had just thrown everything within her reach. Failure. For the first time in her life, she tasted such a bitter failure. Lucas Vance, the man she had dedicated all her scheming to seduce, the man she thought she held firmly in her hand, had flatly kicked her out. He not only acted cold but openly compared her to Grace, and ironically, she was the loser. Grace! Grace! Why is it always her? Haley screamed, her voice shrill. She grabbed the tablet on the table. Every page she opened featured news about Vivian. Artist Vivian, the rediscovered gem of New York's textile world. The masterpiece rebirth and the story of a talent resurrected. Carter Hayes, the collector with the golden eye behind Vivian's success. Every word, every praise was like thousands of needles stabbing into Haley's ego. Grace did not collapse after being discarded. Instead, she lived more vibrantly, shining brighter. She had her own career, the admiration of everyone, and most importantly, the protection of an elite man like Carter Hayes. Meanwhile, she, a rising star, was being cold-shouldered and chased away by Lucas. This comparison drove her insane. She realized crying and playing the victim no longer worked on Lucas. His heart was slowly leaning back toward his ex-wife. If she didn't do something, everything she had built would collapse. No, she could not lose. If she could not be happy, then Grace would not live in peace either. A venomous thought flashed through Haley's mind. She could not attack Lucas's feelings, so she would destroy what Grace was most proud of, her career. In the art world, the most terrifying thing is not a lack of talent, but a stain on one's character, plagiarism. Just that word alone is enough to drown an artist at the peak of their fame. Haley's eyes glinted with malicious cruelty. She immediately picked up her phone and called her manager, a middle-aged woman named Valerie, famous in the industry for her resourcefulness and lack of scruples. Valerie. Haley's voice had calmed, but it was terrifyingly cold. "I need your help with something." "Haley? What is so urgent?" "Find me a textile artist. Needs to be older, retired, preferably struggling financially. Most importantly, her style needs to share some similarities with that bitch Vivian." Valerie paused on the other end. She was smart enough to figure out Haley's intention. "What are you planning? This isn't simple. Vivian has Carter Hayes backing her now." "I don't care," Haley gritted her teeth. "I just need an excuse. Just plant a little seed of doubt, and public opinion will do the rest. Carter Hayes can be as powerful as he wants, but he can't silence the whole world. Money is no object. Name your price." Seeing her absolute determination, Valerie didn't try to dissuade her. "All right, let me handle it." Within days, Valerie found the perfect target. It was Mrs. Martha Higgins, an elderly textile artist in a small town in Pennsylvania. She had some fame in her youth but retired due to illness. She was currently struggling, desperately needing money for her husband's medical bills. Her style did indeed share some classical similarities with Vivian's School of Art. Haley immediately sent someone with a large sum of money to meet Martha, along with a pre-written script. At first, the old woman hesitated, but faced with the massive sum that could save her husband's life, her conscience finally wavered. She agreed to cooperate, providing a few of her old sketches. With their witness secured, Haley and Valerie moved to the next step, fabricating evidence. They hired photo manipulation experts to deliberately alter a few details in Martha's old sketches to match the composition and concept of times, rebirth times, and a few of Vivian's other works. They also fabricated a touching story about how Martha once treated Vivian as a student, sharing her life's work, only to be blatantly robbed. When everything was ready, Valerie contacted a blogger notorious for writing about art world scandals, a person who would write anything for the right price to cause a stir. One beautiful morning, the bomb was dropped. A long, sensational article appeared on an art blog with hundreds of thousands of followers, Genius Reborn or Talent Thief, exposing the truth behind artist Vivian's masterpiece Rebirth. The article was written with deep sympathy for the victim, recounting Martha Higgins' tragic story. Attached were comparison photos between Martha's original sketches and Vivian's completed work. The photoshopped images looked shockingly identical. The article even quoted a tearful statement from Martha: "I do not care about fame. I just want an apology, an acknowledgement of my life's work." Instantly, the article took the internet by storm. The public, always eager for stories about hypocrisy and the downfall of celebrities, quickly piled on. Thousands of comments attacked and cursed Vivian. "I can't believe someone who looks so elegant has such a rotten personality. Turns out she's just a thief. No wonder she disappeared for 3 years, probably went looking for ideas to steal. Poor old lady. Justice for Martha Higgins." The entire New York art world was rocked. Vivian, who had just found the light again, who had just begun to rebuild her life, was in an instant plunged into the abyss of a career-destroying scandal. She was in her studio, completely unaware of the storm of slander and malice rushing toward her, ready to swallow her whole. The media storm hit suddenly and fiercely, exactly like the nor'easter on the interstate that night. When Carter walked into the studio with a grave expression and handed Vivian the tablet to read the article, her world collapsed for a second time. She stared at the screen, the unfamiliar face of Martha Higgins, the sketches that looked both familiar and strange, and the venomous, slanderous words. Every word felt like a knife stabbing into her heart. She didn't know who this old woman was, nor had she ever seen those sketches. But the elaborate setup, those maliciously arranged comparison photos, created almost perfect evidence against her. "No, it's not me," she mumbled. The needle in her hand trembled and dropped onto the hardwood floor with a cold times clink. The familiar feeling of helplessness and injustice rushed back. Being misunderstood again. Being baselessly criticized again. Her dark past with Lucas had made her sensitive and vulnerable. For a moment, she felt as if the whole world had turned its back on her once more. Seeing her turn pale, Carter felt a pang in his chest, but he did not come to offer empty words of comfort. He placed a hand on her shoulder, a firm, reassuring grip. "Vivian, look at me." She looked up at him with panicked eyes. "I believe you." Just 3 simple words, but they held the power of 10,000. It flowed like a warm stream into her frozen heart. No hesitation, no interrogation, just absolute trust. "This is a meticulously planned trap," Carter continued, his voice calm and highly rational. "They prepared very carefully, but the more careful you are, the more flaws you leave. Now is not the time to break down. We have to fight this together." His calmness and faith transferred their strength to Vivian. He was right. She was no longer the weak grace of the past. She was Vivian. She could not let someone trample on her life's work, on the legacy her mother left her. At the same time, in the CEO's office at Vance Corporation, Lucas was also reading the article. Assistant Cole stood nearby, not daring to breathe. Lucas skimmed the article, his face like stone. The rage flared in his chest, but this time, the anger was not directed at her. A flash of doubt crossed his mind. Could it be possible? Did she really do it? He had never truly understood her talent, but then the image of the diary, those words filled with passion and pain, came back to him. No. A woman like her, who cherished textile art as her own life, would never do something so despicable. And more importantly, he knew Haley Adams's true nature. This incident happening right after he gave her the cold shoulder. The timing was too perfect, Cole. Lucas's voice was so icy it made the listener shiver. "Yes, Mr. Vance. Investigate this Martha Higgins immediately. Check all her bank accounts and her family's accounts for the last month. Find out if she has had contact with any strangers." He paused, his eyes sharp as blades. "Also, investigate the blogger who posted this. I want to know who paid him." Cole bowed to receive the order. He knew the CEO was truly furious, but this fury did not seem directed at Mrs. Vance. It was aimed at whoever was pulling the strings from the shadows. Lucas moved in silence, unbeknownst to anyone. He could not publicly step forward to protect her. His pride and guilt wouldn't let him. He didn't have the right. The only thing he could do was quietly find the truth and return her innocence. This was the only way to atone for his sins that he could think of. While Lucas investigated in the shadows, Carter chose a completely different path. He decided to face public opinion head-on. That very afternoon, a press conference was held at the Hayes Gallery. Dozens of reporters and journalists from major art publications crowded into the exhibition room. Vivian was also there. She sat next to Carter, her face still showing a bit of fatigue, but her eyes were incredibly resolute. She was not running away. Carter stood up to face the barrage of camera lenses, unflinching. "Welcome, members of the press," he began in a commanding tone. "I know there is a lot of concern regarding the rumors surrounding the artist Vivian and the Peacetime's rebirth. On behalf of the Hayes Gallery and myself, I assert that these are entirely fabricated slanders." He presented the evidence his team had gathered in just one morning. Vivian's early sketches for other pieces bore her distinct, uncopyable personal signature. Testimonies from veteran silk vendors confirmed she personally selected specialized threads only experts knew how to use. And most importantly, he played a short video clip. It was security footage from the Hayes Gallery showing Vivian sitting at her frame, embroidering Time's rebirth. The time-lapse video showed the entire process of her creating the phoenix from the very first stitches, a process full of creativity and dedication. "True art does not need to explain itself," Carter said, looking directly into the cameras. "Vivian's talent is unquestionable. The Hayes Gallery and I personally will pursue a defamation lawsuit to the very end to protect the honor of our artist." He paused, turning to look at Vivian with gentle, unwavering trust. "I believe in her unconditionally." His definitive declaration echoed through the room. Vivian looked at the man beside her, the man who had stepped up to shield her from the storm without a second thought. A feeling of immense warmth and infinite gratitude swelled in her chest. Two men. One publicly protecting her in the light, one quietly investigating in the dark. Both, in their own different ways, were fighting for her. The net of truth was slowly tightening around the mastermind. While Carter and Vivian's press conference was causing a polarized wave of public opinion, the investigative machine of Vance Corporation was operating at maximum speed in the shadows. Lucas sat in his office, the air around him colder than ice. He didn't read the news or care about the outside gossip. He just waited. Waited for the truth. And the truth did not make him wait long. Assistant Cole walked in, placing a file on the desk, even thicker than the last one, his expression extremely cautious. "Mr. Vance, we have the results of the investigation." Lucas didn't say anything, just gestured for him to continue. "Exactly as you suspected," Cole reported. "The bank account of Martha Higgins' son received a massive deposit of $2 million 3 weeks ago. The funds were transferred from an intermediary account, but after tracing it back, we confirmed it originated from the account of Valerie, Haley Adams's manager. On the same day, that blogger also received $500,000 from that same intermediary account. Everything was as clear as day. A conspiracy bought with money." Lucas flipped through the bank statements, his face devoid of emotion, but looking closely, one could see his knuckles turning white from his tight grip. He had guessed this outcome, but the confirmation still made a fire of rage smolder in his chest. Haley Adams, the woman he once thought was naive and weak, was capable of using such filthy tactics to ruin someone who had no intention of fighting her. "Is there anything else?" Lucas's voice was hoarse. Cole hesitated for a moment before continuing with an even more uncomfortable expression. "Mr. Vance, per your request, the tech team checked the cloud backup history from your phone, and they found something." He placed a small audio player on the desk. "This is an automatically backed up call recording. The call took place at approximately 10:00 p.m. on the 15th. The 15th. Lucas's heart suddenly missed a beat. That was the fateful night on the interstate. His hand trembled as he reached out and pressed play. The silent space of the office was shattered by sounds painfully familiar. First was Haley's weak, pitiful voice. "Lucas, I am so sorry to bother you at this hour. I have a terrible fever." Then his own cold, impatient voice. "Stay right there. Do not go anywhere. I am coming over." And then, the dialogue he was entirely unaware of, the words Haley spoke when he thought she was just being needy. "No, you do not have to. I do not want to bother you and your wife. She probably wouldn't like it. She never liked me anyway. Do not fight with her because of me. I would feel so guilty. Every single word, heard now in this context, was incredibly grating. Every sentence was a provocation, an invisible knife stabbing into his already fracturing relationship with Grace. She wasn't just playing the victim, she was intentionally pouring oil on the fire, turning him into a puppet, a weapon to hurt his own wife. And then, the final part of the call. After he had hung up, but perhaps before the connection severed completely, a soft, triumphant sneer from Haley was caught on the recording, followed by a smug mutter, "Grace Vance. Let's see if you can keep him this time." "Turn it off," Lucas growled. Cole hastily turned the player off. The silence returned, but now it was 10,000 times more terrifying. Lucas sat frozen. His face was no longer angry. It was a terrifying emptiness. The truth was crueler than anything he had imagined. It turned out it was all a play, a perfect play where he was both the audience and the most idiotic leading actor. He had been played. Not just in love, but his entire being, his intellect, his pride. Everything was made a joke by that woman. Because of this fake play, he had doubted his wife. Because of these crocodile tears, he had abandoned his wife in a storm on the exact day of their anniversary. Because of his own selfishness and stupidity, he had single-handedly pushed his happiness off a cliff. Guilt and self-loathing rose like a tsunami, drowning him. He was wrong from the very beginning. He didn't just owe Grace an apology, he owed her his entire life. The emptiness in Lucas's eyes slowly faded, replaced by a cold, ruthless glare. He knew what he had to do. He didn't just have to return Vivian's innocence, he had to make the director of this play pay the ultimate price. "Where is she?" Lucas asked, his voice chillingly calm. "Mr. Vance, Miss Adams is currently filming at Silvercup Studios in Brooklyn." Lucas slowly stood up. He grabbed the file of evidence and the audio player, shoving them into a leather briefcase. Every movement was slow and deliberate, yet harbored a storm about to erupt. "Get the car ready." Lucas Vance's wrath, once ignited, would burn everything to ash. The film set in Brooklyn was on a lunch break. Haley sat in her designated lead actress chair, in a spectacularly good mood. After days of public backlash, Carter's press conference had caused some trouble, but thanks to Valerie's PR team spinning the narrative, it was still a standoff. Many people still believed the tragic story of old Martha. This made her feel that Vivian, despite Carter's backing, wouldn't escape easily. She was smiling, accepting a glass of water from her assistant, when the entire set suddenly fell into an uproar. Everyone's eyes darted toward the entrance. The familiar dark blue Maserati stopped abruptly. Lucas stepped out. Haley froze. Then a burst of joy erupted inside her. He came looking for her. Surely, after a few days of cooling off, he had thought it through and came to make peace. Her tantrum act had worked. She immediately stood up, fixed her dress and hair, then flashed a radiant smile, walking quickly toward him, her tone pouty and slightly aggrieved. "Lucas, you finally came to see me. I knew you wouldn't stay mad at me for long." She was about to wrap her arms around him as usual, but Lucas coldly took a step back. His eyes, sharp as ice, stared at her, a gaze completely foreign, devoid of any warmth, holding only absolute disgust and contempt. Haley's smile froze on her lips. Lucas, what is wrong?" Lucas didn't answer her. He opened his briefcase, pulled out a stack of documents, and threw them directly at her face. Smack! The papers scattered, falling to the ground in front of dozens of cast and crew members. They were bank statements, undeniable proof of the money transfers. "What is this?" Haley stammered in panic. "Look at it yourself." Lucas's voice was as cold as hell. "Look at the play you paid to direct. Look at how much your fake innocence costs." Haley looked down at the numbers on the papers, and all color drained from her face. She stumbled backward, trembling. No, it is not true. I don't know anything. There must be a mistake." She fell back on her familiar tactic. Tears. "Lucas, you have to believe me. Someone is trying to frame me. It must be Grace. She is jealous of me, so she—" "You still dare mention her name at a time like this?" Lucas interrupted, gritting out every word. He pulled out the audio player and hit play. The sound from the recording echoed across the silent set. Haley's weak, fake voice, Lucas's impatient voice, and finally, the triumphant sneer and the vicious words, "Grace Vance. Let's see if you can keep him this time." All ambient noise died out. Everyone present, the director, the actors, the crew stood stunned. The beautiful, innocent, angelic image of the goddess Haley Adams that they had admired completely collapsed. It turned out that beneath that shell was a mind so deeply manipulative and terrifying. Haley stood rooted to the spot, her entire body shaking violently. That recording. Why did he have it? Every escape route was blocked. She had lost miserably. No, it is not like that. She shook her head frantically, tears streaming down her face. But this time, no one believed her. Lucas stepped forward, standing right in front of her. He looked straight into her panic-stricken eyes. The disgust in his gaze was entirely unconcealed. "You didn't just lie to me," he hissed through his teeth. "You turned me into a clown, a weapon to hurt my woman. I am settling this debt with you, with interest." Slap! A resounding, devastating slap. Lucas used all his strength to slap her crying face. The sound was dry and merciless. Haley collapsed hard onto the ground, one side of her face instantly swelling red, bearing the imprint of 5 fingers. The entire set was dead silent. "That slap," Lucas said, his voice like ice, "is me paying you back on Grace's behalf for your lies." He bent down, whispering near her ear, his voice quiet but loud enough for her to hear every single word. "Starting today, Haley Adams, your career in this industry is over." With that, he stood straight up, adjusting his suit collar as if he had just touched something filthy. He didn't spare her another glance, turning and striding back to his car. Haley sat slumped on the ground, clutching her swollen cheek, completely shattered. She looked up, only seeing the cold, cruel back of the man who had once promised to protect her. Surrounding her were the disgusted, pointing stares of her colleagues. Everything was gone. Her career, her love, her reputation, everything vanished into thin air, just after one slap. The plagiarism scandal was extinguished as quickly as it had flared up. The entire truth was exposed in the media the very next morning. The call recording, the wire transfer receipts, the confession of Martha Higgins after being brought in by the police, it all painted a complete picture of a filthy conspiracy. The name Haley Adams instantly became the target of public outrage, boycotted by audiences and brands alike. The career she had painstakingly built collapsed overnight. Vivian received the news calmly. Her innocence was restored, but she felt little joy of victory. She only felt tired. The storm had passed, and the Hayes Gallery returned to its usual quiet. She sat at her embroidery frame again, but this time her mind could not focus. The image of Lucas showing up at the film set, the devastating slap, and his cold declaration to end Haley's career kept lingering in her head. Did he do that for her? Or was it just the wounded pride of a man who realized he had been played? She didn't know, and she didn't want to know. Everything involving him was no longer important. Right then, familiar but heavy footsteps sounded outside the studio door. Vivian looked up. Lucas was standing there. He didn't have the arrogant, aggressive demeanor of his previous visits. His expensive suit was slightly wrinkled. His handsome face was gaunt, with dark circles of exhaustion under his eyes. He didn't walk in, just stood at the door, looking at her with complex eyes filled with torment, guilt, and a vulnerability she had never seen in him before. Vivian set the frame down. She wasn't surprised, nor was she afraid. She simply waited quietly to see what he wanted to do. The silence stretched on suffocatingly. Lucas seemed to be using all his strength just to speak. He began, his voice hoarse and strained. "I came to apologize." Vivian didn't reply, just looked at him quietly. Seeing her lack of reaction, Lucas stepped inside, every step feeling like lead. He stopped in front of her, keeping enough distance so she wouldn't feel invaded. For the first time in his life, the high and mighty CEO bowed his head to a woman, a genuine, unfeigned bow. "Grace, I am sorry." He looked up straight into her eyes. "I read the diary. Everything is my fault. I am sorry for forgetting our anniversary. I am sorry for not trusting you. I am sorry for my thoughtlessness and selfishness over the past 3 years." His voice choked. "And I am sorry for leaving you on the interstate that night." Every apology was forced out with immense difficulty, as if he were taking a knife to his own heart. He wasn't begging for forgiveness. He was simply confessing his sins. Vivian listened calmly. These words, if spoken a month ago, might have been enough to make her burst into tears, enough to make her soften and forgive everything. She had desperately craved to hear these words. But now, hearing them, her heart remained as flat as a rippleless lake. She stood up gently, walked to the teapot, and poured herself a cup. The faint scent of chamomile helped her feel more centered. "Lucas," she spoke, her voice clear but carrying an invisible distance. Do you know? A wound on the flesh, no matter how deep, will eventually heal. At most, it leaves a scar. But some scars aren't on the flesh, they are on the heart. She turned back to look at him, her clear eyes devoid of resentment. Your apology, I heard it, but it cannot heal those scars. It cannot turn back time to that rainy night. And it cannot erase the 3 years of my youth I wasted, waiting for a man who never looked back. She set the teacup down. It is too late. That sentence wasn't a reprimand. It wasn't an angry rejection. It was simply a fact, a brutally calm fact. It was like telling someone the sun had set and nothing could make it rise again immediately. Lucas stood stunned. He had braced himself for her anger, her cursing, even a slap. He could face all of that, but he couldn't face this calmness. The calmness of someone who had completely let go. Helplessness and despair crashed over him, even fiercer than when he realized Haley had played him. He realized that some things, once lost, no matter how much money, power, or apologies you use, can never be retrieved. Grace, he wanted to say more, to hold on, but his throat felt blocked. Mr. Vance, if there is nothing else, please leave, Vivian said. Her tone was polite, but it was an eviction notice. I have work to do. She turned back, picking up her embroidery frame. Her hand remained steady, the silver needle dancing across the silk again, as if the man standing behind her was merely thin air. Lucas stood there, looking at her slender but resolute back. He understood that the door to her heart had truly closed. He had slammed it shut with his own hands, and now, he himself could not open it. Vivian's cold rejection did not crush Lucas. Instead, it ignited an unprecedented persistence and stubbornness within him. He understood that empty apologies no longer worked. He had made too many mistakes, hurt her too deeply. Now, he had to use actions to prove his remorse. He had to learn how to love someone all over again, to re-pursue the very wife he had thrown away. But the problem was, Lucas Vance, a CEO accustomed to being pursued and obeyed, had absolutely no idea how to do it. And so, his journey to win back his ex-wife began with a series of incredibly clumsy and awkward actions. The next morning, a luxurious Maybach stopped in front of the Hayes Gallery. Lucas, looking sharp in a suit, personally carried an elaborate breakfast basket from the city's most famous five-star restaurant. He thought women all loved expensive, romantic things. When Vivian stepped out the gate for her morning walk, she encountered this scene. She stared at him in shock. Breakfast for you? Lucas held the basket out toward her, looking a bit unnatural. I didn't know what you liked, so I got a little bit of everything. Inside the basket was caviar, seared foie gras, and French croissants, items entirely inappropriate for a morning meal. Vivian looked at the food, then at him. She just quietly said, Thank you, Mr. Vance, but in the morning, I am only used to black coffee and plain toast. With that, she walked past him, continuing her walk. Lucas stood frozen in place, holding the expensive breakfast basket, looking completely out of place. It was then he realized that after 3 years of living together, he didn't even know his wife's simplest dietary preferences. His first failure didn't discourage him. He switched to tactic 2, waiting. Every afternoon after work, his Maserati would park on a street corner across from the gallery. He didn't go inside. He just sat in his car, quietly watching her studio window. He waited until the lights went out and she left, thinking this was a silent display of care and protection. But this action caused Vivian no small amount of trouble. The appearance of the familiar luxury car and the famous CEO quickly drew the attention of the neighborhood. Rumors began to spread. Mr. Vance is trying to win back his ex-wife. Artist Vivian and the CEO are getting back together. This made her feel incredibly pressured and awkward. One afternoon, Carter personally walked out. He tapped lightly on Lucas's car window. Mr. Vance, can we talk for a moment? The two men stood facing each other on the sidewalk. Carter maintained his refined, polite demeanor. Mr. Vance, I know what you are trying to do, but your methods are only causing more trouble for Vivian. She needs a quiet life. My business with her doesn't require your concern, Mr. Hayes, Lucas retorted coldly. It is between you two. Carter didn't flinch. But Vivian is currently an artist at the Hayes Gallery. I have a responsibility to protect her privacy and peace. If you truly want to make it up to her, please use a different method, one that doesn't put her in a difficult position. Carter's words were like a bucket of cold water, making Lucas realize the selfishness in his actions. He was only thinking about expressing himself, without considering her feelings. After that, he stopped waiting publicly. He began to use his strengths, power, and business acumen. He secretly investigated Vivian's studio needs. He learned she was struggling to find a supplier for a rare vintage silk thread, a crucial material for her next piece. The supply was incredibly scarce, almost monopolized by a massive textile corporation. Without a single word, Lucas used his connections, applying pressure to force the corporation to supply the thread to the Hayes Gallery at a discounted rate. A few days later, Vivian received the news from the supplier. She was incredibly surprised and thrilled. Carter saw the joy in her eyes and smiled, but he had a suspicion. He knew securing that deal wasn't simple. Vivian probably guessed it too. She didn't say anything. She didn't say thank you, but she didn't reject the silent help either. For the first time, his action didn't make her feel annoyed or pressured. It actually touched on exactly what she needed. Sitting in his office, looking at the report that the silk shipment had been successfully delivered, Lucas felt a complex mix of emotions. He didn't receive a thank you, he didn't receive a glance, but being able to help her solve a problem and seeing her career thrive brought him a strange sense of satisfaction, a feeling even better than signing a billion-dollar contract. He realized that pursuing someone wasn't about using expensive things to show off. It was about quietly doing the things they truly needed. The road ahead was long and difficult, but at least he had found the right direction. The Hayes Gallery at night returned to its usual deep serenity. Pale moonlight filtered through the oak leaves, casting sparkling streaks on the koi pond, where colorful fish swam lazily. The air carried the sweet, pure scent of late-blooming flowers. After dinner, Vivian and Carter took a walk together in the small garden. It had been a long time since she felt such peace. No more worries, no more scheming. The slander scandal had passed, and the masterminds had paid the price. Her life seemed to be settling into a new orbit, calm and full of hope. "How is your new piece coming along?" Carter broke the silence, his deep voice blending into the quiet night. "Almost done," Vivian replied, a soft smile on her lips. "Thankfully, you helped me find that vintage silk thread supplier." She said it casually, but both silently understood that the person actually behind it was not him. Carter stopped by the koi pond, his eyes looking down at the rippling water, but his words were directed at her. "It seems Mr. Vance is truly trying to change." He stated it bluntly, without any jealousy or mockery. He simply pointed out a fact both he and she had noticed. He respected her, and he trusted her to be smart enough to judge things for herself. Vivian remained silent, her hands subconsciously tightening. It was true. She wasn't oblivious. Lucas's clumsy but genuinely heartfelt actions recently had caused the ice wall in her heart to crack multiple times. She tried to ignore it, tried to act cold, but the heart doesn't always listen to reason. The wavering, no matter how small, existed. Seeing her silence, Carter turned to look at her. His deep eyes under the moonlight were more tender and sincere than ever. He knew if he didn't speak now, he might never get another chance. "Vivian," he called her name. "No," he corrected himself. "Grace." His sudden use of her old name made Vivian look up in surprise. That name was tied to a painful past, tied to the weak person she had tried to bury. But when it came from Carter's mouth, it lacked any sharp edges. Instead, it carried a sense of inclusion, a total acceptance of who she was, including her past. "The pain in your past, I have no way to erase. The future Lucas Vance can give you might be a peak of luxury that I can never match," Carter said, his voice earnest and pleading. "But Grace, I can give you something you might need most right now." He took a step closer, close enough that she could see her own reflection in his deep eyes. "I can give you respect. I can give you understanding. I can give you a quiet space to be Vivian, to be yourself, without having to watch anyone's mood. I can give you a home, a place where your art and your soul are always put first." He paused, taking a deep breath before finally saying the words he had buried for so long. It wasn't a flashy promise. It was a simple, warm proposal. "Grace, let me take care of you." The world around Vivian seemed to stop. Carter's confession wasn't intense or demanding. It was like a warm stream gently flowing into her arid heart, bringing a comfort and peace she had never known. She stood completely stunned. She was grateful to him, she respected him, and perhaps she had developed special feelings for him. He was the one who pulled her out of the swamp of despair, the one who helped her find herself again. A peaceful future with this man. It was a remarkably beautiful, incredibly appealing prospect. But the image of Lucas with his tormented eyes, his clumsy acts of redemption, suddenly flashed in her mind. The scar in her heart, though no longer bleeding, still throbbed when the weather changed. She was standing at a crossroads. On one side was Carter, representing a warm present and a peaceful future. On the other was Lucas, representing a painful past, but someone who was trying with all his might to make amends. How was she supposed to choose? Carter. She was flustered, not knowing what to say. Her eyes reflected her dilemma and a bit of panic. I need time. Seeing the hesitation in her eyes, Carter didn't pressure her. He just smiled gently. It is okay, I can wait. Just know that there is always someone here waiting for you. He took a step back, giving her space. But his confession was like a stone thrown into a still lake, creating ripples that endlessly spread through Vivian's heart, making it impossible for her to calm down. The New York Contemporary Art Center was in its final days of preparation for one of the biggest events of the year. Vivian, as one of the invited artists, was personally supervising the installation of her new piece. It was a massive textile screen depicting the golden aviary, exquisite and magnificent in every detail, the culmination of her hard work over the past few months. Carter was also there. He stood quietly beside her, occasionally offering advice on lighting and placement angles. His presence made Vivian feel more secure. However, her heart was still tangled by his confession from a few days ago. She tried to push all thoughts aside and focus entirely on her work. Just then, an unwelcome arrival shattered the quiet atmosphere. Lucas, in a crisp suit, strode into the exhibition hall. His presence instantly drew everyone's attention. He ignored them all, walking straight toward Vivian. "I heard you have a new piece," he said, trying to act casual, but his eyes couldn't hide his complex emotions upon seeing her standing next to Carter. His sudden appearance made Vivian incredibly uncomfortable. She didn't want to get tangled up with him, especially in a public place like this. "Thank you for your interest, Mr. Vance," she replied coldly, her tone distant. "But we are working here. It is not a good time for guests." Lucas seemed to not hear her rejection. His eyes were glued to the magnificent screen. He could see the confidence, the pride, and the free soul in this artwork. It was completely different from everything he thought he knew about her. Regret and a sense of loss flared up in him again. "Grace, can we?" He was about to say something more when a piercing metallic screech from above cut him off. Everyone instinctively looked up. A massive lighting truss, suspended on a metal scaffolding system, was being moved by workers overhead. For some unknown reason, one of the securing bolts had come loose. The heavy scaffolding suddenly lost its balance, tilted, and plummeted straight toward where Vivian was standing. Everything happened too fast, in the blink of an eye. "Vivian!" Carter screamed, lunging toward her, but he was several steps away. He wouldn't make it in time. Vivian froze, her body stiffening. She could only widen her eyes, watching the massive block of metal hurtling toward her, her mind completely blank. In that life-or-death split second, when all thought ceased, a dark shadow launched forward like a bolt of lightning. "Grace!" Lucas roared. Without a moment of hesitation, without a second of thought, all his arrogance, regret, and calculation vanished. Only the most primal instinct remained, the instinct to protect the woman he loved. He lunged forward, using all his strength to shove Vivian out of the danger zone. At the exact same time, the heavy scaffolding crashed down. Crash! A terrifying sound echoed through the exhibition hall. Vivian was pushed hard to the ground, safe. But when she turned her head, a horrifying sight met her eyes. Lucas lay there, his back and left arm pinned under the scaffolding. Fresh blood began to seep out, dyeing a large patch of his white dress shirt red. "Ah! Oh my God! Call 911! Panicked screams erupted everywhere. Carter and the staff rushed over, frantically trying to lift the scaffolding. Vivian scrambled up, her entire body trembling, and stumbled over to him. She dropped to her knees, looking at his face, which was pale with agony, sweat pouring down like rain. "Lucas! Lucas, are you okay?" Her voice cracked, full of a terror she didn't even recognize. Lucas struggled to open his eyes. He looked at her. His deep eyes now held no coldness or possessiveness. Only extreme worry and absolute tenderness remained. He tried to force a smile, but it only made his face look more pained. "Grace," he rasped, his breath weak. "Are you okay?" His only question at that moment was for her safety. Vivian's tears could no longer be held back. They fell heavily. The ice wall she had tried so hard to build completely collapsed in that instant. His instinctual act of sacrifice, his final words of concern before passing out, delivered a massive blow to the deepest part of her heart. The sound of ambulance sirens approached from afar, piercing the air, but Vivian heard none of it. She just stared at the man lying in a pool of blood. A profoundly complex emotion surged up, drowning her. It was shock, terror, and a painful sliver of love she thought had died long ago, suddenly coming back to life. The air in the VIP room of Manhattan General Hospital was so quiet you could hear the ticking of the wall clock and the steady beeping of the heart monitor. The faint smell of antiseptic mixed with the pure scent of white orchids placed in the corner of the room. Everything was immaculate and high-end, but it couldn't dispel the heavy, cold feeling. Lucas had woken up after a multi-hour surgery. His left arm was broken and suspended in a cast. His back had been pierced by a metal rod. Luckily, it missed his spine, but it left a deep wound and severe bruising. He lay on the bed, his handsome face usually radiating dominance now pale, his lips chapped. He looked unusually fragile and vulnerable. Vivian sat on the chair beside the bed, holding a small paring knife, carefully peeling an apple. The thin, even rings of apple skin fell onto the plate without breaking. Her movements were incredibly practiced and focused, as if executing a work of art. She had been here for 2 days and nights, ever since he was wheeled into the ER. She hadn't left his side. Carter had come to visit. He stood at the door, watching her intently peel the apple, then looked at the man sleeping soundly on the bed. He didn't say much, just quietly set down a fruit basket. Before leaving, he told her one thing. "Grace, listen to your heart. Whatever you decide, I will always respect it." She understood what he meant. His confession was still there, a promise of a peaceful future. But right now, her heart was a chaotic mess. Lucas shifted slightly, his long eyelashes fluttering before slowly opening. His gaze was a bit hazy, then gradually focused, landing on her side profile. He saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the faint dark circles under her lower lashes, and his heart gave a sharp ache. "Grace," he spoke, his throat dry and scratchy, making his voice hoarse. Vivian's hands stopped peeling. She looked up, meeting his gaze. 4 eyes locked. In the silent room, it felt as if an invisible electric current passed between them. "You're awake." She set the apple down. Her voice was calm, but no longer cold like before. "Do you want some water?" She helped him sit up carefully, placing a soft pillow behind his back, then brought a glass of warm water with a straw to his lips. Lucas obediently took a few sips, his eyes never leaving her. This familiar, gentle care. How long had it been since he had it? No, rather, how long had it been since he knew how to appreciate it? "Why are you here?" he asked, his voice still weak. "Where is Carter?" He knew that man was the one who had the right to be by her side right now. "He had to go take care of some business," Vivian answered vaguely, avoiding the question. "You were injured because you saved me. Me staying to care for you is what I should do. Is what I should do." Lucas smiled bitterly, a smile that made the wound on his back sting. Vivian didn't reply. She cut the peeled apple into small pieces, stuck a silver fork into one, and offered it to him. Lucas didn't take it. He looked deep into her eyes, his gaze tormented and sincere. "Grace, can we talk for a minute?" Not as the CEO of Vance Corp, but as Lucas Vance, your husband. The word times husband, times coming from his mouth right now, carried the weight of 1,000 pounds. Vivian trembled slightly, but she didn't refuse. She set the plate down, sat up straight, and listened in silence. "I read the diary," he began with difficulty. "I know everything. I know that night was our anniversary. I know you waited for me." Every word he spoke acted like a hammer striking the ice wall in her heart. "I have no excuse for my stupidity," he continued, his tone full of self-reproach. "I got so used to your existence, so used to your sacrifices, that I thought it was a given. I was arrogant, selfish. I never truly tried to understand you. I was blinded by Haley's fake act, but that's no excuse. The biggest fault is mine. I didn't cherish the treasure I had." He reached out his uninjured hand, wanting to hold hers, but then timidly pulled it back. "I killed Vivian, turning you into a hollow Mrs. Vance. And then I heartlessly threw that Mrs. Vance away. I don't deserve your forgiveness." Vivian listened in silence, tears beginning to spill over. But she wasn't crying for him, nor was she crying out of being moved. She was crying for herself, for the Grace Vance of 3 years ago, the one who loved so foolishly and waited so foolishly. These words, she spoke, her voice choked with emotion. The Grace of the past waited so long to hear them. Lucas closed his eyes, a hot tear rolling down his temple. I know it is too late. But Grace, I am not begging for your forgiveness. I am just begging for a chance. A chance to make it up to you. A chance for me to learn how to love you again, to love both Grace and Vivian. Can I? The most honest and profound conversation between the two finally took place. No more misunderstandings, no more hiding. Just a man confessing his sins and a woman facing the scars of her past. Vivian didn't answer. She just reached up and gently wiped the tear from his cheek. A very light touch, but it made Lucas's entire body tremble. Forgiveness, perhaps, is not a decision, but a process. And that process seemed to have sparked to life in this quiet hospital room. A month later, Lucas was discharged. The wound on his back had healed, leaving a long scar. His arm was out of the cast, but still required physical therapy. These scars would probably become a permanent reminder of the mistakes he had made. Throughout that month, Vivian stayed by his side to care for him. She wasn't too intimate, nor was she too distant. She fulfilled her duties as a relative. Their relationship hovered in a fragile, suspended state. Neither dared to speak up to break it. The divorce papers still sat in the lawyer's office, neither withdrawn nor processed. On the day he was discharged, she had packed her bags, intending to return to the Hayes Gallery, but Lucas stopped her. "Come somewhere with me, can you?" he asked. His tone wasn't a command, it was a plea. He looked at her with imploring eyes. After a moment of hesitation, Vivian nodded. He drove the car himself, not the sporty Maserati Levante anymore, but a stable, black Bentley sedan. Ironically, it was the same color as Carter's car. Perhaps this was also a reflection of the change in his temperament. The car rolled smoothly. Vivian looked out the window, not asking where he was taking her. But when the car merged onto the on-ramp for Interstate 95, her heart involuntarily skipped a beat. She knew where he was taking her. This road used to be her nightmare, but today, there was no storm. The sky was blue, the sun shone a brilliant gold, and the scenery on both sides passed by peacefully. Everything was different, only the road remained the same. Lucas drove very slowly. He was silent, concentration evident on his face. Finally, he pulled over onto the emergency shoulder. It was this exact spot, the place where, months ago, he had heartlessly kicked her out into the freezing storm. Vivian subconsciously clenched her hands. The painful memories rushed back. But this time, there was no panic or despair, only a lingering sadness. Lucas didn't say anything. He unbuckled his seatbelt, opened his door, and walked around to the passenger side. He opened her door, a gentlemanly action he had never done in their 3 years of marriage. He held his hand out to her, palm facing up. A large, strong hand, but bearing a few faded scars. "Grace, step out of the car." His voice was deep and incredibly gentle. Vivian looked at his outstretched hand, then up into his deep eyes, which were filled with anticipation and a touch of anxiety. She hesitated for a split second before slowly placing her hand into his. He gripped her hand tightly, a warm and reassuring hold, and gently helped her out of the car. The two of them stood on the shoulder of the interstate as cars zipped past them. The light breeze blew her hair. Lucas still held her hand tightly, refusing to let go. He looked straight into her eyes, his gaze utterly sincere and earnest. "Grace, I brought you back here not to reopen your wounds," he said, his voice raspy with emotion. "I just wanted to stand in the exact spot where I made the biggest mistake of my life to ask you one thing." He took a deep breath. "Give me a chance. Let me personally take you home, to start over from the beginning. Will you?" His words were not a flashy promise. It was a humble plea, a new beginning right at the place where everything had ended. Tears welled up in Vivian's eyes. She looked at the man in front of her. The man who had once caused her to suffer enough to wish for death, but also the man who had unhesitatingly used his own body to protect her. She saw true repentance in his eyes. She saw the change in who he was. The ice wall in her heart had shattered long ago. The scars might never disappear, but perhaps she finally had enough courage to face them, to give the past a chance to heal. She didn't answer immediately. She didn't say yes, but she also didn't pull her hand away. She simply, slowly, tightened her grip, squeezing his hand in return. A gentle squeeze, but one that contained forgiveness, hope, and a promise for an unwritten future. Their future still lay ahead, full of challenges, but this time, they wouldn't be alone. They would walk that road together, starting over right where they had stumbled. The brilliant golden sunset cast upon the two figures standing side by side, stretching their shadows long across the asphalt, as if painting a brand new beginning.